welcome to episode 5 of Scoot Talk Sports. Really do appreciate you dropping in. As always, we record live here on twitch.tv/SCOOTR. I'm Scooter. Jeremy, welcome to the show. Appreciate you being here. We have a pretty good one ahead of us. There's a lot to talk about. So without further ado, let's talk about what we have on the show today. We have a round table to start, talking about Gold Cup. Gold Cup semi-final matches were last night. We know the final matchup now. There's a lot to talk about both on the American side and the Canadian side. So I've been lucky enough to bring in Jeffrey P. Nesker from Waking the Red, who is going to bring a little bit of the Canadian perspective. And then we've also brought back TobesLeroney. Tobes, as you guys know him, who's a American fan, a huge United States national team nut, as well as a Twitch creator. So I'm really excited to bring those two in. After the round table, we'll be bringing in Kristin Knowles, who's a member of the Vocal Minority podcast, has been doing podcasts for much longer than I ever have. So it'll be really exciting to bring her in. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Canadian women's national team, the Olympics, and the game coming up against the States, which is going to be a huge semifinal for the Canadian women. And final guest will be CoachJeter. He's a friend of the stream, a friend of the channel. He's a swimming coach as well as a Twitch content creator. I wanted to dive in a little bit with him and get to understand, his love of the sport, how he got into swimming, and maybe we'll talk about, whatever else ends up coming up during that interview. So big thank you once again to everybody who's jumped in, whether you're here on Twitch or whether you're listening on the podcast that releases a couple days later. Big thank you for being here and much love. So without any further ado, we'll get started on the first segment today, which is going to be a roundtable discussion with Jeffrey P. Nesker and Tobes. Let's go ahead and bring them in here. Welcome in, Jeffrey. Welcome in, Tobes. Thank you so much for taking the time today, guys.
Hey, thanks for having me. Sorry, let me just adjust my my angle here.
Yeah,
all right,
no worries.
Thanks for having me as well, Scoot.
No problem. Jeffrey, you're a writer, a contributor for Waking the Red, as well as a massive Canadian fan. So big ups. Thank you for joining today. And Tobes, familiar to those who have watched the show before, a United States national team nut. If you're watching on Twitch, you can see he's got the kit out already. He's ready to go for this one. So lots to talk about from the semifinals last night. Before we get started, let's take a little moment. Woo-saw. We'll take a minute and get... I think the Canadian fans need a minute to just breathe. With this moment, breathe, take that energy out, and we're going to talk about this. It's going to be fun. So, thanks again, guys. Before we get into into I think the more controversial result, let's talk a little bit about the United States Qatar semifinal. It was obviously an interesting game in its own right. It was a lot. I think there was a little bit of a difference between the two. One was a little bit higher energy and the other one was seemed a little bit more methodical. I'll start with you, Tobes. What was your initial thoughts from the semifinal game between Qatar and the States?
Well, going into the game, having watched Qatar throughout this tournament, it was pretty clear they were going to play a 5-3-2 defensive shell with three flat midfielders, and their goal is to just absorb pressure the whole game. And then when they hit you on the counter, they are lethal. They are quick. Akram Afif up top was, arguably one of the players of the tournament so far. So we knew what they were going to do. And for the first 50 minutes, 60 minutes, that's exactly what happened. They absorbed our pressure. They would steal the ball. They would come forward. Our goalkeeper, Matt Turner, was forced into a lot of big saves. So we were very tense. But then around that 60th minute mark, something that Qatar's failed to do all tournament is use substitutes. Even throughout the group stage, they didn't do that at all. And you could tell their players just got tired. It was as simple as that. Nothing tactically really changed, but we brought on all 5 of our substitutes. They substituted, I think, an injured player and then one other player meaningfully. And we were able to take advantage of that and really come into the game the last 30 minutes and score the winner.
What were your thoughts, Jeffrey? I assume you were watching that game as well.
I was. I mean, I've deliberately avoided all the usual postmortems because I imagine the hyperbole and the hagiography is pretty strong for what was a pretty middling result, if we're going to be honest. How much are you going to celebrate the hero that is Giassi Zardes, CONCACAF legend, right? I think the less that we say about the game, the better. despite the fact that American press is going to be spilling so much ink over this wonderful result that gets them to yet another final in the Gold Cup. Surprise, surprise. So, I mean, I think you can tell that I'm a little frustrated. I sort of gave you the preface, Scoots, before I came on today that I'm frustrated, and I thought sleep would maybe help, and it kind of didn't. So yeah, I mean, yay, the Americans are back in a Gold Cup final, as it should be, I guess. Yeehaw.
Yeah, to be clear, I don't disagree with you at all. The performance, partially due to the roster selection, was not strong. We haven't really had a strong performance the entire tournament. We were outplayed by Canada. It was a very 50-50 game against Jamaica, and then we were outplayed for 60 minutes against Qatar, and then we're able to squeak a 1-0 win, classic Berhalter ball style. I'm not going to say it was a brilliant performance or anything.
Good, because what I've read on the internet is, so I'm pleased that there's somebody that isn't
absolutely
saying
not.
That. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I love about Tobes is, as much as he's got that bias and he, is just like me, I try to keep it to the side, right? And I think, Tobes is a good conversationalist for that reason. Is, let's not shine it up. I remember what the chat was like when we were doing the watch along last night. Nobody was a fan of when Zardes got on. No one was interested in him being there. There was mostly people who were upset. And even after he scored, some of the comments from the chat that I remember was, I'm upset that he scored because now it justifies him being there. Tobes, can you talk a little bit about that? Can we break into this Zardes conflict of interest a little bit between American fans, where you're happy to see him score, but at the same time you're conflicted because you don't want him part of the team? Is that your sense too?
Yeah, I mean, when Gyasi Zardes is on the field, you know that his first touch is going to be terrible. He's going to give the ball away pretty much anytime you pass the ball to him, which is not what anyone wants in their striker. But in Gyasi Zardes' defense for this game particularly, Daryl DK was our starter. He was clearly injured. He hurt his shoulder against Canada. He kind of got nicked in the face against Canada, and he grabbed his face, over-dramatically fell over, and hurt his shoulder when he hit the ground. And he hasn't looked right since then. His left arm is hanging limp the entire game. He's not well. He's just missed a one-on-one. He looks completely useless on the field. So I didn't actually hate Gyasi Zardes being subbed in. I mean, striker is a terrible position for the United States men's national team. You have an abundance of talent. Like Jonathan David, I would take Kyle Larin as our starting striker any day of the week over any of the guys we have. Yeah, of course. Josh Sargent, to me, is still our best striker. But when everyone's doing so poorly, I don't hate getting Gyasi on the field, because at least he's going to be in the box. He's going to try. And then you couldn't really say the same about the other players who could play that position on this roster.
Any thoughts to add to that, Jeffrey? Like, what have you seen from a?
I just love hearing someone say that Josh Sargent is their best option at the head of the attack. That fills me with such Schadenfreude. I love it. I was just gonna say, it's one of my favorite things about the United States, and I'm a dual citizen, so I can drop some. It's the country that decides to make Las Vegas, and it's the country that decides to make Las Vegas. Like that's a good and bad thing, right? Yeah, I mean, it's an island of misfit toys, the American roster. I'm pleased to see that Greg Berhalter is kind of giving them an identity, kind of. I mean, for so long the identity was, are we ever going to have this generational change that we've been threatening for a long time? And I'm pleased to see that it's happening. I don't know if I like the new identity, though. I think that's my issue. And I also don't know if you guys have the talent to play Greg ball, right? Which is, it just, and then you eke out these 1-0 wins, and it's like, are you paying the soccer gods? Like, do you have them on the books? Because it's so frustrating. These, I'm not going to say Qatar played you guys off the park, but they certainly came to play. And, you miss a penalty. If he had made that penalty, if he had converted that, I think maybe we'd be looking at a different final. And I say that with peace and love.
I agree.
So yeah.
And it's not even just the penalty. Matt Turner made 2 incredible saves in the first half. One off A shot outside the box deflected off James Sands. Matt Turner stretches miraculous reflex off the deflection. And another deflected shot came to I think Ali was the striker's name, and he volleyed it, and Matt Turner is leaning to the right and somehow gets his left hand out and say it should have been 2-0 going into halftime. The optimist in me says that Qatar still would have tired no matter what, and if it was just 1-0, it might have been 1-1. We go to extra time.
I actually think that's a fair point. The scheme for substitutions on that bench was non-existent. I completely agree with you. I mean, there were no subs to rate, right? Other than forced injury subs, and you don't play tournament football without a good substitution plan. So without question, absolutely.
And I think, the other thing that I noticed in that first half too is that Qatar actually had a lot of good chances where they couldn't seem to get the foot on the ball in the way that they wanted. So we talk about those 2 saves. I think there was a lot of other opportunities that, Qatar just didn't look confident in the box. They were hitting it on the counter, getting it into the box. And then I can't remember the player's name, but he was right on the top of the box and he fired it, I want to say 6 or 7 feet over top of the net. And there was no one near him. He had time and to make what I thought was a really dangerous shot. So that first half, I remember messaging a couple of folks who are American fans. It might have been Tobes too, and I was saying, how are you feeling? Like I'm tense for you guys right now. Like I'm feeling stressed for you guys, and that's not a normal thing for me because it just seemed like the States were controlling the ball, and as soon as they lost it, Qatar was away for a chance.
Yeah.
I think a lot of my optimism surrounding the last 2 performances is that my expectations coming into the tournament were so incredibly low. Like Greg Berhalter had not shown any ability to change anything in a game ever. He subs likes for likes out every time. He'll sub out the right back for another right back who's the same player instead of trying to change anything tactically. We play against Canada. I like that he started with a different formation. He tried a 5-3-2, but then the hydration break happens in the 20 whatever minute. Canada talks about their press, and it's just like we don't touch the ball for the next 70 minutes because Greg is sitting there going, I wonder what's wrong. But then in these last 2 games, especially against Jamaica more so than Qatar, I felt like he was actually kind of making tactical tweaks, moving sub midfielders back, making substitutions where the person coming on looks energetic and changes the game. And like that is so refreshing to me as a United States fan who I was not a big Berhalter fan. I'm still not really a big Berhalter fan, but it's showing me that our manager, just like our players, can improve, and I want him to keep improving. But there's a slight optimism as I've seen him actually affect the game these last few knockout matches.
It's a very fair point.
Yeah, it's something that we wanted to touch on a bit too today. I think it was Berhalter's growth as a manager, right? And you touched on it there, his ability to do the in-game management, the pieces of not just doing like for like, like anyone can do that. I think I could probably do a pretty good job if that's the only job I'm doing during a game. I think I can handle that. Aside from the talks and everything else, but just switching like for like, there's not a lot of thought. It feels like that goes into that. Jeffrey, I'll start with you this time. What have you seen from Berhalter since he took over? Like, have you seen an evolution of a manager? Have you seen him?
I have, and I wonder how much of that is him, and how much of that are players coming back, like Sergio Dest from Barcelona, and saying, "Well, this is how Kingsley or whoever coached Barcelona last season." I want to say Kingsley Coman, but maybe he's a player on Bayern Munich. That's how tired I am.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's got to be, I imagine Christian Pulisic has got a mouth on him now. And, in training is like, well, this is how we do it here and there. So it could have been a disaster, but seeing it gives me, it gives me positivity towards the future for the U.S. men's national team, that he's not just evolving tactically, but he's also evolving in terms of man management. And with a roster like that, I think that's really important, right? If you look back at Berhalter's sort of life or career as a manager in MLS, he found his core group of players and then sort of moved with them, right? And so that doesn't suggest he's very good at man management, or maybe it does, but he finds his favorites and then they sort of take the journey with him. You don't necessarily get that with the player pool in the U.S. men's national team. If someone's hot, they come in, and if they're hot, they may have a mouth on them. So seeing his ability to sort of deal with those egos, I think is a really good sign for the U.S. national program moving forward.
What are your thoughts, Tobes? What have you seen from Berhalter over his development as a national team manager?
Well, I worried now that I'm talking him up a little too much because he's not a great manager by any means. I think that you can see Canada's manager. I don't actually know the name of the Canadian manager, but
John Herdman.
John Herdman against us clearly outmanaged Berhalter. Against Mexico last night, I thought he clearly outmanaged Tata Martino. So I'm not trying to sit here and say that Greg is the best manager CONCACAF has ever seen, but from where we were, in 2019, where it seemed like Will Trapp was our defensive midfielder for the next decade, and I was crying, or even a few months ago, it was Jackson Ewell. I'm glad that he is. I mean, I say Sebastian Lletget still does start every match, so
Yep.
we're taking some hits somewhere, but I think he's improving. He's slowly getting to the places that we want him to be, and the federation's never going to fire him unless he starts to not qualify for the World Cup. So all I can do is just hope he continues to improve.
It's nice when you have a family connection in the federation, right?
Yeah.
That helps.
That's just overt, man. At the end of the day, it's always who you know and not what you know. So but yeah, at least he's not doing that weird thing with the right back becoming like an 8 at the Tyler Adams formation. Like that was weirdness, and he was so stuck on that too. Like,
and he tries to do it with like they have like one practice and then they try to go play it in a friendly, and it's like all 11 if that's gonna work, all 11 players need to know exactly what's going on, and it just doesn't. You can't do that in the international game.
Mm-hmm.
So next thought around the American team, Matthew Hopp has seemingly started to emerge as a true attacking talent. I know that you wanted to chat a little bit about that, Tobes. What are your thoughts as you see this player develop? Is it somebody who you think is going to become a key cog for the national team?
Maybe a key cog. I just know that when I saw this original U.S. roster, it is almost entirely filled with people in that 25 to 50 range. If you were rating every U.S. player from like its skill top to bottom, so realistically, a lot of these players I don't think have much of a future with the national team. And Matthew Hoppe was someone who we hadn't. These were his first caps. Was in this tournament, so we hadn't really gotten to see him play. All we know is he scored a hat trick for Schalke that one game and then went invisible the rest of the season. No one had really seen him play that much. He was playing as a lone striker on a team that didn't create any chances. So no one knew how good he was at all coming into this camp. He gets shifted to the wing, and he is our only player, in my opinion, on this entire roster who seems to be able to take a touch or two when there's pressure on him and not lose the ball. He can maybe dribble around someone. He had some incredible crosses to Daryl Dike for a goal against Martinique. In this game, he had a beautiful pass that set up Daryl Dike's great chance. He's the only person that has this confidence to take players on, and he reminds me a lot of. I don't want to say he's as good as, but he reminds me his attitude of a young Clint Dempsey. He's angry. He's fired up the entire time. He's definitely not that talented yet, but I think he's young, and I'm kind of hoping he can fill the striker void for us.
How's his rap game? Can he spit some verses?
Not as good as Clint Dempsey.
Oh man, can he?
I haven't heard him. I haven't heard him try. Maybe.
He's still working on it. It's going to drop on SoundCloud right when he needs to.
Nice,
to create that hype.
Nice.
When he doesn't start the final, it's gonna be a Greg diss track.
You know what? I would be here for that.
Yeah.
Players start releasing tracks when they're upset about something happening. I mean, let's go. Like,
if he can figure out 4 decent rhymes for Bernhalter, I think he's in the chart.
He's in a good place.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So where would you rank him in terms of the strikers available for the American team, Tobes? Is he somebody who's going to move up into that kind of A team echelon, or does he have?
It's a little hard to say because he still hasn't played striker for us. Greg called up 5 strikers and 1 winger for this roster. So Matthew Hoppe is being forced to play out wide, just like Giacchini, just like Jonathan Lewis, who is terrible and shouldn't even be on this roster. So we're playing strikers out wide. We haven't ever seen him play centrally for us, but I think he's already ahead of everyone but Josh Sargent. Daryl Dike has been terrible this tournament. Daryl Dike has kind of been injured this tournament, but Dike and Zardes both they have brick feet. And they offer you other things. They offer you strength. They can win headers in the air. They can hold up play if the ball doesn't bounce off them straight to the midfield. But I think bar Sargent, Hoppe is probably number 2, and he could be number 1. Josh Sargent's stock is going up a lot by not being at this tournament. just by not playing. Let's watch every other striker.
Absolutely.
Back up to the top.
Your number one not playing is my favorite thing in the world. I'm sorry if I'm trying not to grin, this shit-eating grin right now, but
I feel like we share a lot of the same opinions. I'm just frowning about them, and you're smiling about them.
I find it interesting that you've already discounted Daryl DK though, because
I don't want to completely discount him.
Okay, good.
Sorry
to
cut you off.
Yeah.
I just think he has a lot of developing to do. Where he is right now, he's not there. He has to get a first touch. He can't. If you see him come up, if he's facing a defender and the ball's at his feet, I've never seen him not lose the ball. He has to figure out how to fix that. And he's young, right? He's young. He didn't start playing soccer till he was in his young teens. This is something he's been growing with his whole life. So he can get there, but I don't see a lot of players get significantly technically better after they turn 20. So I'm a little down.
I'll send your condolences to Tajon Buchanan.
I didn't see Tajon before 20, so for me, he's always been this good.
Nice, nice.
Yeah,
so
see,
I'll send your congratulations when I call him later. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in terms of the conversation around the States, I mean, I think we can agree, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think that the clear man of the match for the American team was Turner.
Yeah,
absolutely, no question about it. But when you look at this American team, there's actually still, even with that performance from Matt Turner, there's still a lot of depth at that position for the Americans. There's Zach Steffen, there's Ethan Horvath, and then of course there's Matt Turner. Like, do you see Matt Turner continuing to carry this torch forward, Tobes, or do you see one of these guys eventually stealing the net from him?
It's tough. I think the general U.S. community thinks that Zach Steffen is the current number one. He's the Man City backup. Pep Guardiola talks him up all the time. And when he's available for selection, when he's not injured or when he's not in preseason with Man City, he usually starts. But I don't think he had a great last year. I don't think anyone really did. He played the cup matches. He was at fault for the goal in the FA Cup semi-final against Chelsea. He came in to a camp for the Nations League, and he and Ethan Horvath each played 2 games, and Ethan Horvath outperformed him by bundles. Ethan Horvath had a great game against Switzerland. Zach Steffen had middling games he almost lost us the semifinal against Honduras. Josh Sargent, our best defender, apparently had to head the ball backwards off the line to make up for his mistake. But Zach Steffen's a backup playing cup games. Ethan Horvath was a backup at Club Bruges behind Simon Mignolet, not playing any games. He just got his transfer to Nottingham Forest, and there's talk they had the reigning goalkeeper of the championship from 2020. So no one even knows if he's going to continue to start. And then we move to Matt Turner. He's in the MLS. Generally, you want our starting players to be located in Europe, but Matt Turner in MLS, I think it's fair to say, is the best shot stopper of the 3. But he can't pass. He has no distribution skills. And luckily for us, we abandoned him trying to play it out the back. He just lumps it forward every time to Daryl DK and Giassi Zardes, which is the way you have to play with him. So I think he's clearly the best shot stopper. You have to change the way you play. And you ask any USMNT fan, and they will tell you, I'm an Ethan Horvath fan right now. I would pick Ethan Horvath. I thought he was excellent in the Nations League every time he touched the ball. But everyone gives you a different answer, and I don't know what Greg's going to do.
Jeffrey, your thoughts? Have you seen?
I love this. I love this. I mean, let's choose the guy that's not getting any minutes at Man City, or the guy that's not getting any minutes at Club Bruges, and our own domestic league, the guy that's starting every game. No, we hate him. We don't want to play him because we hate our own domestic league. I absolutely love this. This is fantastic. You guys are gonna ego yourself into starting the goalkeeping coach. At the end of the day, Matt Turner should be your starter. He's getting regular minutes. He's playing with Giassi Zardes. Like, all of your guys except for the hero that is Josh Sargent are playing in your domestic league. It makes sense. I mean, the Euro snobbery, I think is amazing. I think it's amazing in 2021 that's still going around U.S. men's national team circles. Because more than 2/3 of your roster are MLS lifers. You know what I mean? So I think you need to get over that pretty quickly.
I do try to evaluate players on an individual basis. I think there are clearly some MLS players that are good, and clearly some European-based players that are poor.
Yeah.
And then, obviously the reverse. There's clearly some MLS players like Jackson Newell that I really don't think are up to snuff, and clearly some European-based players that are our best player, our absolute best players are in Europe still.
I think maybe this generation. I mean, I for every Christian Pulisic, I give you a DeAndre Yedlin, right? So,
yes, absolutely.
You know what I mean? I just
at the exact moment, like Christian Pulisic, Giovanni Reyna, Weston McKennie, Serginho Dest.
Without question.
There's a name that came up in chat yesterday too, Tobes, Yedlin. Just one of the things that, before you jump in there, Tobes, is one of the things that I've noticed too. There seems to be a little bit of almost, and I, as a Canadian fan, I've seen it here too, where there's almost a little bit of self-loathing, where there's a little bit of, you're looking at your team and you're going, wow, this guy isn't quite, and you're comparing him to someone in another league, in another nation, and expecting us to be at the top level right away. And I'm okay with a player coming from the MLS. I'm okay with a player coming from the Canadian Premier League, wherever they're playing and they're showing, and they're going to come into a camp and have an opportunity to take that place, right? It does make sense to me that the player who is playing the most would be the one that you'd want to go with. The sort of hot hand is always thrown around, right? Do you think that hurts the selection camp, or do you think the selection group doesn't care about this at all and it's purely a fan-based conversation?
I mean, the fan base definitely has a lot of very strong opinions on both sides. There's a lot of people who think that Gyasi Zardes is clearly our best striker or things like that. And there's people who are like, DeAndre Yedlin over in Turkey currently in his current form is our best right back and things like that. And I think I think people have trouble evaluating talents in different leagues. You have to kind of know the quality and not just the quality, but what happens in each league. Like in the MLS, you get a lot of, I feel like the teams that defensively bunk or whatever, they will give, for example, like a defensive midfielder, they will give them time and space on the ball to try to pick out a pass. But they're probably pretty athletic. The MLS has pretty high levels of athleticism. And you have to take these things. So if a defensive midfielder looks good in the MLS, they might not actually be that good when they start getting pressed. Or if a player in Europe is really good at wiggling out of tight spaces, and then they go play CONCACAF, or they go play like a certain CONCACAF team that's bunkering super far against them, it takes a different skill set. You have to kind of understand what players look better in certain environments and what players look worse in certain environments.
Any thoughts on that, Jeffrey?
I agree. I would actually extend it to say that everybody should be viewed under that microscope. Like there's no difference a guy playing, Pulisic in his role at Chelsea, right? And under the microscope of, is he going to be able to do it at the Azteca on a Tuesday night, in the rain with urine being thrown at him? And I think that I think that it's an important calculus, right? And I do think that the binary attitude of, well, it can't happen with our Chris because he plays for Chelsea, that's marketing, right? And the casual fans are not going to have this level of sophistication, and we can't ask them to. But it's an interesting thing to know. It's no different, like the Olympic basketball. If Michael Jordan's not on the American team, then they're going to lose, right? Well, there could be a better small forward that isn't, doesn't have a Netflix series that, maybe works better in that context, right? So it just is what it is,
Yeah, it is.
We're guilty of it too, right? Like,
100%.
Absolutely, without question.
I mean, I can still remember when, it was probably Nations League 2019, 2018. And this is before we get into Canada, but just talking about Davies, and people were talking about, well, how is he going to handle CONCACAF football? How is he going to handle when guys are going studs up at him every single time, right? And we saw it when he plays here and he plays in CONCACAF. Guys go at him like he never sees over in Europe. That the kind of stuff that there would be problems in some of those games. People would be getting each other's face. In CONCACAF, it's like, well, that's guy tackling you. You just get used to it. It's going to happen every single time.
It's only a yellow if they break a bone.
Yeah,
exactly.
So it's interesting you mentioned that, Jeffrey, because it is something that as much as I try to drag my European fans and friends and whoever else to watch games in CONCACAF, when they start to see it, they go, wow, this is tough football. And it's like, especially against some nations, you don't see that level of physicality, I don't think, in the Euros, unless certain nations are there. It's a lot of really tough football, and I think that's lost sometimes. You see guys play beautiful football in Europe, in a top flight league, and they come over here and they're getting the shit beaten out of them. It's a very different experience, right?
I have a lot of love for CONCACAF style footy, though. I really do. I mean, as much as I love the flowing, beautiful game, I'm a huge fan of chaos, and CONCACAF delivers on the chaos 100% of the time. So, yeah,
I do also think Pulisic, as you brought up, was probably one of the best examples of that, because when he plays for Chelsea, I watched his Champions League performance against Porto, and he drew 11 fouls. So some record that since Messi in 2011 or something like that, he drew the most fouls in a game. And then he came to CONCACAF, tried to play against Honduras and Mexico. The same things are happening to him, and the refs aren't giving him the whistle. And he was pretty ineffective in both of those games, and until he scored a game-winning penalty, and everyone remembers him as the hero. Whereas I thought Giovanni Reina, on the contrast, handled the physicality a lot better and was probably our best player in that tournament.
I agree. I absolutely agree with you. He was a revelation.
Who knew that I'd bring on two folks cheering for two different teams, and the constant feedback is, I agree. That's a great point. You guys are doing great. Love it. It's the opposite of Fox, where you set up two guys to just argue, and they're just the opposite point for no reason other than just have one, right?
No, exactly.
This has been great. So that I think has been a really good conversation on the States. But before we wrap it up, obviously the States are now going into this final against Mexico. It's a little bit of conflicting feelings for a Canadian supporter, but after that match, which we'll get into shortly, I'm kind of rooting for the States to take a little bit of a shit kicking to Mexican team. What are you feeling, Tobes? What are your thoughts going into that final as an American fan? Are you concerned? Are you worried? Are you confident?
No, not confident. Very concerned. Very worried. I think Mexico clearly has to be the favorite. I mean, Canada outplayed us, and then Canada went up against Mexico, and Canada kind of outplayed Mexico too, but Mexico did get the win. You just look at the talent on the Mexican squad, even if they haven't really come together right now, like the midfield matchup is so incredibly lopsided in this game. Edson Alvarez and Deep, I don't know how we're going to break through him. I'm concerned. I think we might, our best chance, our set pieces have been terrible all tournament. I think our best chance is the classic bunker all game and win a corner and win 1-0 again, like we've done the entire knockout stage.
Jeffrey, as a dual citizen, as somebody
they're coming for you. You beat them in Nations League. They're coming for you.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think you guys have a snowball's chance in hell. I think they're going to attack you with the verve and the panache, and the refs are going to be looking for soft calls because it's CONCACAF. You guys aren't a bunker team. It's not your identity.
Yeah.
You'll frustrate yourselves as much as Mexico is going to frustrate you. You're not a bunker team. I don't see it happening. So even though I think the strategy is sound to eke out a win, I don't see it happening. I see you guys. I see you guys going foot on the gas, maybe conceding early, and then it's just going to go to hell in a handbasket. But it will be a fun game to watch. As long as I can get over being this upset and we want to watch soccer again ever.
I do think it's going to come down to Matt Turner. He's going to get tested early, and if he is up to the task, if he can get us scoreless into the 40th minute, we can truly see, has Greg learned? Is he able to look at this tactic? Is he able to move the midfield, change the formation, make the subs, whatever is needed? Yeah. But Matt Turner is going to have to keep us in it early, because we're going to get it's going to be an onslaught.
Yep. Yeah. It's all dependent on the power of his eyeliner. The man looks like he's got eyeliner.
He does.
Perpetually. Yeah.
He does.
Yeah. It's pretty goth. I like it. It's like My Chemical Romance styles. Dig it.
The mood of the match, you can see it.
Absolutely.
Thought from the chat here. I do try to bring in some conversation from the chat where I can. Stick Piano, if we do try the defensive sitting back and really trying to cement that defense, he believes Hector Herrera will absolutely shred the Americans. He thinks Mexico can be beaten out wide. Hop could be absolutely key. Tobes, any thought about that? Do you think wide is the way to go against Mexico if you're the Americans? Are you even going to play that way?
In attacking sense, I do expect the 4-3-3. I think he kind of wants to play 5 at the back, but our center backs, Walker Zimmerman's hurt, Donovan Pines is hurt. We couldn't even do that if we wanted to. Yeah. So I think we're going to end up playing the 4-3-3. And I do think if we're going to score from open play, it is going to be from wide. I think it's going to be Hoppy against one of their fullbacks who haven't necessarily been the star players on their team. But I want to take this moment to highlight our other best player of this tournament has been Miles Robinson. Incredible defender from Atlanta United. Ever since Walker Zimmerman went down, I was worried, what are we going to do? But he's really stepped up. Miles Robinson has been incredible. And it's going to be, Hector Herrera bossing the midfield. Can he find someone, or will Miles Robinson be able to cover that? And if it's in front of Miles Robinson, can Matt Turner save it? And I don't like the bunker style. I don't necessarily think it's the way I want to play or the best way to play. But I think just given the talent disparity between the teams, if our midfield tries to control the game, we're going to get hit on the counter immediately, and it's going to be Tecatito and Funes Mori and Hector Herrera coming at Miles Robinson alone. James Sands, James Sands has been great all tournament, but was very poor last night, I thought. Especially in this 2 at the back system. I think he really likes to be central in a 3. So I'm worried if we try to go forward that we'll just get hit on the counter, and that'll be it.
Here's the final question for you guys. Now at the time this is recorded, people are going to go back and remember what you said. What are your predictions for the final? Jeffrey, I'll start with you. What do you think the final will be?
3-1 Mexico.
3-1 Mexico. Okay. Tobes?
I'm optimistic. I guess I'm optimistic at our ability to keep goals out. I think it'll be 1-0, probably to Mexico. But I don't think they'll score a load. I think Matt Turner's been great. I think Miles Robinson's been great. I think they'll either squeak one early. If they score one early, it's going to be 3 or 4. Yeah. But I'm hoping Matt Turner's up to the task. It'll go to halftime 0-0, and it'll be tight game.
And then they kill you at the death. That sounds like fun.
I've never.
I don't envy you. Yeah.
So speaking of the pain that we've been trying to keep down here, Jeffrey, we're going to go ahead and switch the conversation. So we talked a bit about the Americans' game against Qatar. We talked a bit about the American team's tactics. We've talked about who we think is going to win in the final. But now it's time to peel back some layers of pain here and talk a little bit about the Canadian-Mexico match yesterday. For those
Do we have to? Can I talk about the women's team instead? Can you get Kristin? Can we switch places?
Yeah, I mean, she gets the positive one today.
Yeah. Exactly.
For those who didn't watch the game, it was a very, very tight match. I think if you're a Canadian fan, you have to be incredibly proud of how the players played and how they showed that they are not just another team in CONCACAF anymore. We are a team that can play at the top level in international football. But there was a lot to break down. There's a lot of frustrations. There's a lot of calls, as we know with any CONCACAF game. It's one of those situations. So I'm going to start with you, Jeffrey. First thoughts on the game overall. Like, what did you walk away from that game feeling?
The president of CONCACAF is Canadian, and I really would like to sit down with him for 5 minutes and give him a piece of my mind. The second is that chant. We're not handling it correctly. If it becomes an advantage, as it did last night, then what are the consequences here, right? Like, looking forward to World Cup qualifying. I don't know if this is still the thing, but the Mexican Federation was going to pass the sanctions that were levied against them for the chant to their women's team. That's not cool. And then tonight,
not at all.
Tonight or last night or whatever, what is time anymore? But to see the chant happen and it become an advantage is insanity. It's insanity. Not only did it stop the momentum dead, but how many minutes of extra time were there? Obviously just enough for them to get the dagger, right? Mm-hmm. It's difficult. I do not like speaking in generalizations. I do not like wearing my tinfoil hat. I'll say this: let us play. Let us play. I felt that there were too many stops in play last night. I felt, I thought the refereeing was decent for a CONCACAF game, which means it was absolutely heinous by any other standard. But let us play, man. Let us play. We came to play last night. We had a great game plan. We bossed them in spots. Let us play. I'm happy to lose, but not like that, because there's too many variables to introduce, right? And then this, the amount of sore winning that we saw, after the fact. Like, Tejan did not need the kind of racial abuse that he was getting on his personal social medias and on the New England Revolution social media, right? You know, I'm trying to see the positive. I'm trying to see the positive here, because you can tell by the Mexican response, the Mexican fan base response, they found out about us last night and we put them on notice. But I would have preferred to have put them on actual notice with a win and a final appearance for us. Mm-hmm. I think we deserve that win. I think, you know, I'd like to think that this will make, there are so many times in the, I mean, I was saying this on our show, right, with Mike last Tuesday. Every time Canada plays, the goalposts change now, every single time. And, you know, the attitude after a win or even a tight loss, it's been a lot of wins, has always been, well, it's okay if we lose the next one because, you know, we won this one. And that was our attitude, very, very Canadian going into the match last night. And I was saying on Tuesday, I can't wait for the pendulum to shift and us to get that kind of like insane self-belief that our neighbors down south have, that swagger, because it's coming. It's coming. I don't want to see this as a setback. In the same way that like the 8-1 to Haiti was, in the same way as Atiba was onside. We've lost a lot. We've lost a lot to CONCACAF shenanigans, and I want the quality of the team. Just let us play. You know what I mean? And we were so close to transcending all the shenanigans and winning on our own merits last night. And then in the final analysis is like, no, not yet. CONCACAF's still here, guys. Guess what? And so it did feel like 8 steps forward, 18 steps back. And I'm trying to process it. There's a lot to unpack. I'm so proud of the team. I'm so proud of them. You know, we did that without our 3 main guys. We did that without our starting keeper. We did that without maybe the most CONCACAF player on our roster, which is Lucas Cavallini, who's, you know, there was no game better than a Mexico-Canada tie for Lucas Cavallini to start in. You know, and we found out a lot about our team. We found out that our B squad are amazing. You know, we found out that Steven Eustachio, who a lot of people in my orbit have been high on for a very long time, is an absolute gem. I mean, my God, is that an exciting player? So I'm still processing, right? I'm happy about the women's performance, but I'm so pissed off, man. I'm so frustrated. You know, as much I'd like, it sucks because I don't know which team I want to win in the final because they both annoy me so much. So, but yeah, there's my rant. I don't know if I can go without going in circles. Yeah.
I think you've reflected what a lot of people are feeling here, is that we did feel like we were there. We were there. Mm-hmm. We were about to finally show CONCACAF that it doesn't matter what they throw at us. We can win on our own merits, as you mentioned. And then to have that chant issue, which we're going to get into, the added time, and then having it scored in that added time, it just felt like a dagger that had been not only put into your back, but then, you know, decided to twist it around, push it in a little bit deeper, you know, dance a little bit. Like, yeah. It just felt like, it almost felt like CONCACAF laughing at us. It really
laughing at us with choice language, you know, a chant that doesn't work in 2021, right? Like it really did. It felt like the bag of urine came right through my television set and hit me in the face, right? So, yeah.
Tobes, did you, as the American fan here, what did you think of the Canadian and Mexico matchup? Like, what stood out to you? What did you see? And did you also find the same kind of frustrations just in terms of the way CONCACAF handled that chant?
Yes. I mean, if we're going to talk about the chant more in depth later, I'll probably wait for my piece for that conversation. But I had the same exact frustrations. The refereeing was incredibly frustrating. It reminded me a lot, actually, of the CONCACAF Nations League final between the U.S. and Mexico, except that in that it was just kind of terrible. And here it was terrible and one-sided in this particular game. It was terrible and one-sided. I think there's been 4 50-50 penalty calls involving Canada in this tournament, and every single one has gone against Canada, including that one where Walker Zimmerman got injured in the game against us, which somehow was in Canadian corner when the ball didn't go out of play. It's a foul one way or the ball's in play. You can't I already said my piece on that last time.
But it's still a fair point, Tobes. Like, it's one of those things where if you're a fan, if I'm bringing a buddy who watches Euro or whatever, and they see that as a result, like it's not even supposed to be an option from what happened on the field, yet here you are doing a corner, and it's like, how do I explain that? It's
CONCACAF. Sorry, Scoots. It's CONCACAF, basically.
CONCACAF, right?
Yeah.
When I try to pull myself away from the context of the tournament or this game, where I think Canada can be incredibly frustrated, I think it is an incredibly strong performance from Canada. And when we talk about bringing in Kyle Larin, Jonathan David, and Alphonso Davies, and Cavallini into this team, moving forward to World Cup qualifying, on top of some of the problems that other federations are having, like such as Jamaica, I think Canada is really in a prime position to, the top 3 automatically qualify for the World Cup, and the 4th goes to a playoff. I think Canada is sitting in a pretty good position right now.
Yep, I agree.
I agree too. I think if we were trying to pull a positive out of there, I know it's tough, Jeffrey. We're going to squeeze one out right now. Is that and I think the players were alluding to it last night, is that they have all the motivation in the world now for the World Cup qualifiers. When they meet Mexico in that World Cup qualifiers,
watch out.
Be intense games, and I'm really looking forward to it. Like, just trying to put aside that frustration.
I feel you, Scoots. I hope that we're here after that after the Octo, going, man, losing out in the semis of the Gold Cup was the best thing that ever happened to this team, because we just steamrolled through that tournament. So, that's what I'd like to see. Sorry to interrupt you, Toby.
No, you also just don't want, because this happens, right? It's CONCACAF, and you don't want this generation of players' first real experience with that to be when you need 3 points to get to the World Cup. You want it to be, you don't really want it in the Gold Cup semifinal either. You'd rather have it in the Gold Cup group stage or in a friendly. But I think rather now than, the last couple of games of World Cup qualifying.
Yep. And it's one of those lessons that doesn't come with to me, it isn't anything we did that caused the lesson. We played well. We did everything we were supposed to do. It was other factors that were outside of, in my opinion, the Canadian team's control that caused a lot of the frustrations that we're talking about. Like, it's not like we're talking about how the guys played. We're not talking about...
at the end of the day, finish more chances and we don't have to complain about the refereeing, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, Taisho Akindele's got his finishing boots on. We confused them in the first 20 minutes, totally different outcome, right? Cava maybe was a huge miss, probably, because he could have done his usual shithousery and just made Mexico, because you could tell that Herdman's instructions to the team was chaos, set play to chaos and frustrate the Mexican side. So the more people that were comfortable with that kind of chicanery, I think, especially at the beginning, could have influenced the result. I feel so disingenuous because I hate blaming the refs. I hate blaming variables, but sometimes your hand is forced, right? Like Tobes was saying, 4 50-50 battles, like a clear foul, at least in the box on Richie, and they get a corner kick. Like, that's what laws of the game are that? Like, I'm pretty sure that we've had... Did you not get the memo from 1976 or whatever when we changed it? So, but I agree with you. The positives are finding out that Fonzie's not afraid to get totally attacked studs out style. Big win. Finding out Jonathan has no problem doing that as well, or Kyle has no problem doing that as well. The revelation that is Tajon Buchanan. These are all fantastic things. John Herdman has this team ready to run through walls for each other. They can't possibly quote the word brotherhood more than they have over the last 2 weeks. This is all fantastic. So I appreciate you guys making me feel better.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tobes, if you had your choice of teams in the tournament, who do you think has impressed you the most? Because I think and this is me trying not to be biased, and it's going to sound like it's biased, but I think Canada's been one of the most impressive teams in this tournament. Do you see that as an American fan as well?
Yeah, I think Canada probably is. Coming to this tournament, I knew Tajon Buchanan's name, and that was it. So him alone, I think makes Canada one of the kind of breakout teams of the tournament in terms of my expectations to what I'm seeing in front of me. I didn't expect a ton from Qatar either, and I thought that they do actually have a couple of good players, and they're very lethal on the counterattack. Afif, as we said, is still might even be, one of the players of the tournament. They're kind of second striker in their 5-3-2 system. Just the way he is so lethal on all these counterattacks.
God, I love that formation. I love the 5-3-2 so much. It's such a good formation.
You lull your opponent into thinking, they sit with 65% possession, but do nothing with it. And then, especially when your front two are good, like Cutter's were.
Like
El Salvador
Josie Altidore and Sebastian Giovinco. But
and then, God, flashbacks.
Yeah.
El Salvador did better. I mean, we're talking marginally now. I didn't expect a lot from El Salvador, and they did a little bit better. So they're probably the third team I'd bring up.
So here's where I was leading into that question, because we're going to break into a few different conversations here on Gold Cup. But Jamaica was a team that I think was shockingly disappointing. It's a team that I've always followed. I like watching. I think it's hard to find anyone who doesn't like watching the Jamaica team or want to watch the Jamaica team. But they just seemed like they were lost. And from some of the things that we talked about a little bit before, some of the things that you've seen reported, the federation struggling to pay players, Leon Bailey sitting on the bench the entire United States against the United States was weird to me. What is going on with Jamaica? Jeffrey, I'll start with you. What have you seen from that nation that is honestly they just didn't seem prepared? Is it just COVID or is it an issue?
Yeah, I think we give them a COVID mulligan here. The federations, running a federation is expensive in the best of times, and planes, quarantine, stuff like that, it adds up. I don't have access to their books, but I would imagine they run a pretty tight ship. And, all the stuff that COVID introduced, all the extra expenses and stuff like that. I think they made decisions to the detriment of their performance based on the fact that they just couldn't afford, or they didn't want to take on the extra expenses. So they did the bare minimum. And I think we saw what the bare minimum looks like in terms of on-field decisions. They look like an unhappy squad. Right. So I don't know if there's issues with the manager and some of his players. I don't know if there's issues with the players and their own mental health. It's been a tough slog for everybody these last couple of years. So like I said at the beginning, I give them a mulligan. I mean, the team that disappointed me the most was Costa Rica, not because it wasn't fun to destroy them, but we were very scared of that team, and they look nothing like the Costa Rican side that's been haunting our nightmares. So that would be my number one. But Jamaica, I give a COVID mulligan to. Absolutely.
Tobes, what are your thoughts on Jamaica?
I do agree that COVID probably is the reason that they're having financial problems in terms of finding an agreement with their players. But what COVID doesn't really account for is that the relationship between the players and the federation seems to be broken. A few months ago, it was they were going to get Mikel Antonio and Ivan Toney and all these, Premier League players to come, duo national eligible players, Nathan Redmond, to come play for their national team. And it's kind of been a 180 where now a lot of the European-based players seem to have a bit of a beef with the federation and with the non-European-based players. They don't get along. Their manager, it looks to me like one of the worst managers in CONCACAF right now. He seems a little bit like a dead man walking. I'm kind of waiting for him to get fired because the players don't really like him either, from what I can tell. They don't like his decision making in terms of tactics or in terms of squad selection. And it looks to me like we're kind of seeing a golden generation die, the way I was worried that the United States one would die. I'm worried that if the federation and the players cannot get on the same page, it's going to be more of Leon Bailey not playing. It's going to be more of Andre Gray not playing. They're going to be playing USL players against us like they did in the quarterfinals. And they need to mend that because they have all the talent to be a top side in CONCACAF.
But for how long? I mean, one of the things that I'm most impressed with Berhalter is how he handled the generational change. Do you know what I mean? How he handled the Michael Bradleys and the Josie Altidores and the Sasha Kleshchens and I still think it's insane that Darlington Nagbe isn't a penciled-in starter for the U.S. men's national team. It's insane. Like, you guys need a 6, and he's maybe the best in your player pool.
He doesn't want to. He's declining call-ups.
I would too at this point if he dicked me around as much as Darlington Nagbe. But I agree with everything you say. I think they need a coach. I can only imagine what it's like to be a soccer player of some esteem on the wrong side of 30, getting international call-ups, dealing with coaches that maybe want to limit your minutes, right? Because that insane self-belief is what got you to that point, what got you to your career, right? So the last thing you're going to be able to do is turn it off. And then here's all these people on the periphery saying to you, will you accept limited minutes? Are you cool with being a super sub, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And then they're not paying you. I mean, how long are you going to stick around? But, you know, that like at the end of the day, they have to figure that out. And I don't think that that's unique to the Jamaican Federation. I think that that's something that all football federations go through on a regular basis as generations change. Jamaica's just feeling it right now, and it's really bad timing with COVID and all that other stuff, right? Yeah.
What is time, right? This last 2 years, 3 years, who knows? It's all 1 month in my mind.
Yeah.
Let's get into the last topic, because I wanna keep some time for it, because I think this is something that is going to be talked about quite a bit. It's something that I don't think people outside of CONCACAF have realized is an issue that's been going on for a long time, but it is the chanting from the Mexico supporters. For those who don't realize what it is, I'm not going to repeat obviously what's being said, but they're considered to be discriminatory, homophobic chants. They're received depending on what country you're in. It can mean different things, and in the majority of countries, it's considered completely unacceptable. And so what happens is, whenever a goaltender, or excuse me, a keeper is about to kick a ball forward, you're going to hear the crowd go, ah, and then there's a slur. It's the way that the Mexican fans have done it for a very, very long time. What CONCACAF has done hasn't amounted to much. They've asked them politely a few times. They've made some tweets with nice videos asking people not to do it. They've given them the option of which games they want to play empty, which you alluded.
Well, FIFA, that wasn't CONCACAF. That was FIFA stepping in.
FIFA, okay.
Right? Yeah.
But let's get into it, Jeffrey. Because I know you want to get into it, so I'll start with you. What can CONCACAF do to stop this from happening? What is the appropriate response?
CONCACAF's done nothing. CONCACAF's not going to do anything. This is a FIFA thing. It's been proven that CONCACAF's not willing to do anything until Big Brother FIFA steps in, the FIFA overlords. And then the issue is FIFA mandates something. CONCACAF says we'll do it, and then finds wonderful ways to sort of half-ass do it. Do you know what I mean? I don't give a crap. Like, I saw a lot of tweets, you know, well, this is our culture. This is, you know, and there's a point to that. Like, South American machismo culture is a thing. But so is female genital mutilation in Africa, and we don't allow that either, right? If you want to be in a global situation, sometimes it asks. It's not all give. Sometimes it's take. And if you want to play in our pool, it's not cool anymore. And I don't care. I don't care about the traditions, and I don't care what it means, because at the end of the day, it's wink, wink, nudge, nudge, especially when it's giving them an advantage, right? The Mexican fans are doubling down on it because they feel nasty, right? It empowers them, you know, and it's also now becoming a proper advantage. So I don't buy it. I don't buy this like sticking up for the tradition thing, because that's just a funny way of saying we like how it makes us feel, and we also are getting knock-on effects from it. So why wouldn't we stop it? In terms of a solution, I think it has to be pretty zero tolerance at this point. It does. You know, if Mexico is serious about being part of the global football economy, and the global football economy is becoming very emphatically, the women's game is becoming as important as the men's game, and the women's game is very, very progressive, and that's one of the tenets of the women's game, very socially progressive. You cannot do this. It's not cool. It has to stop. And it's as simple as that.
Tobes, your thoughts? Anything to add to that?
The part that's kind of been so confusing to me about this is that I understand some people say, oh, but it's not, they think, oh, it's not offensive to me or whatever, so I'm just going to keep chanting it. But what I cannot agree with is that when people are actively telling you, this is harmful, this is hurtful, and you continue to do it, like, how do you not have any empathy to anyone else in the world who is begging you, like, please stop doing this?
Yeah.
And you just can't see outside of yourself and say, well, it can't hurt me, how could it not hurt anyone else? Like, the complete lack of empathy from the entire community, or I guess not the entire, I shouldn't paint with any broad strokes, because not every Mexican fan is doing this, but it doesn't make any sense to me how I can't fathom how these people don't have any empathy for people who have different feelings than themselves about the chant. And as for what you should do about it, the first thing that immediately comes to mind is like, they don't get any fans for any of their home games. But
and not women's federation, men's federation. Yes.
The kind of problem I see with that is that in the U.S., the Mexican national team is basically more popular than the United States national team. So these chants are happening in the United States from Mexican fans. So then do you ban United States home from having home games? You can't really do that. So then I almost wonder, do you have to threaten forfeits for the Mexican team until is that the only thing that would work at this point? I'm not really sure.
It's complicated.
I mean, yeah.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? How is the U.S. Soccer Federation willing to lose money? You know, like how much do we care about this, right? Because at the end of the day, if it's an empty threat, it's understood, right? Right now, we understand that the U.S. Soccer Federation, with all of these games and all that money on the line, this is the extent of what they're willing to do. You know, please stop. Little go fun, you know, polite tweets, etc., etc. Well, it hasn't been working. So do we consistently keep trying to do this, knowing full well that there's no way you're going to cancel games? No. Then you move to forfeiture, right? But who's going to enforce that? We know CONCACAF isn't. And we know that FIFA is happy to say, you guys do it, you handle your own shit. And then CONCACAF says we will, and they don't. So, you know, it's just this vicious cycle. Like, you know, somebody's got to stop passing the buck and actually take responsibility for this. Otherwise, just let it happen, because it's this vicious cycle. You know what I mean? I'm not on the side of letting it happen, but I'm also a realist with respect to everybody's just throwing work. Talk is cheap, man, and everybody's just talking right now. Like, put your money where your mouth is. Like, properly put your money where your mouth is. Like, US doesn't get 70,000 fans and that ticket and that gate revenue, and it's going to hurt, but it's for the betterment of the sport, which is so sacrosanct to how the United States operates. Wait, we're going to lose money? Forget about it. No way in hell. It's just this endless cycle, and the Mexican fans know it. They know it.
I think one of the things I want to point out, and I did notice, and it kind of warmed my heart a little bit, is after the chant started, right when that basically Mexico got a water break right at the end, and we'll get into the added time too. But I saw cameras moving around, and there was actually a few Mexican fans who were standing up and absolutely losing their mind on people, like telling them to shut up, sit down, stop doing it. And it's like, more of that, please. I want to see more sections stand up and turn to the group and go, stop it. Like, we've all been at games. It's easy to know who is participating in a particular chant or doing something, or is louder than the rest of us and doing something that's inappropriate. We all know who it is. It's the ability of pointing at it and saying, that's the person that's doing it. Remove them or do something. Like, I don't know whether forfeits will ever happen. I don't know if CONCACAF will ever actually push it, because Mexico is one of the biggest nations. It's a big moneymaker for them. Like, I just don't see it happening. As much as I'd love them to go to forfeits and push this issue to do the right thing, money speaks in North America, and money speaks to CONCACAF and FIFA more than anything, as we've seen in a lot of situations.
And you raised two really good points. One is that sort of small course corrections is probably the way that this gets solved. Like, once there's a critical mass of Mexican fans in the States and in Mexico that are like, nah, but you know, that's years, if ever. And the other one is, I lost my train of thought for a second. I'll get it back eventually, but I had a really good second point that just went away completely. So
no worries.
Sorry.
Just a comment here from Sir Grunge before we jump over to you, Tobes. They're seeing issues, obviously, with racism, chants, different things, and what they're trying to do is they're actually trying to ban the individual fans that are causing the issues. How do you do that in a ground in CONCACAF? Like, it just seems to me like we don't have the same amount of stewards in grounds that they do overseas. It's not the same type of, there's someone within 5 meters that I can talk to immediately about this. Just a thought, no question there. It's one of those things where,
I mean, what I don't want to happen, and what I'm a little worried could happen. I mean, I'm not seriously worried about this, but they start like banning banning fans based on like their skin color because they think they could participate in the chat. That would be the worst thing that could ever happen.
Yeah, getting to racial profiling gets really easy. And that was my second point, actually. If we do this, where does it stop? You know what I mean? Like, we can all agree that a hardline approach to the chant is in a best interest, but I can find 3 people that wouldn't. And I can also find 3 people that would start screaming bloody murder about, what I don't want big soccer infringing on my personal liberties or whatever the case may be. And there's an argument to that, right? Like you said, does it become, well, you can't wear colors to the game? Does it become, well, your chanting has to be under this decibel range, and we've got meters, and you're going to get banned the same way as the chant people did because we have this power now. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. There is no easy answer. I think, Scoots, you're probably right that the organic, the fans sort of eating each other is the way that this ends. I just don't know if I have the patience for it, because I have skin in the game. I'd like to see Mexico get penalized so that we have an advantage finally going into the games that we have to play against them in the Octo. There's nothing altruistic in my stance here. I want any advantage that we can get, especially considering that chant is abhorrent and they keep doing it.
It's just one of those things where there's no clear and honest way to fix it that's easy or straightforward. I don't want to paint all Mexican fans with the same brush. I have Mexican fans who are friends of mine. They were in the chat last night.
I agree.
They're not fans of it either. But in reality, I've been in those sporting events where things have been happening, and do you know what the most effective way of getting something toxic stopped is? Usually when there's more people who are upset about what that toxic behavior is.
Absolutely.
And I think, we can point fingers at FIFA, we can point fingers at CONCACAF, and there's lots of reasons to. I mean, lots of reasons to, but they're just not going to be the ones to enforce it. It has to be the fans.
I think we know that outright at this point. They've got things that they've got. Listen, they've been hemorrhaging money for 2 years, right? Now is not the time to start asking them to give up gate revenue and stuff like that.
I also wonder, and I don't think it's their job to, but if the players or the manager could start participating and trying to get rid of this, maybe they already are, and I don't know about it, but I think if they were to come out and make some, we've seen players in Europe do this, make some strong statements against it. I wonder if some of the, more of the fans would shift their opinion, which would lead to that critical mass coming faster. And I don't think it's any players, it shouldn't be their job to do that, but the reality of where we are means that I really think maybe they should start thinking about it.
Well, it's one of those things where it's your influence, right? Your ability to, it's not your job, but here you are, you have a platform, you have the ability to influence this conversation in a positive way. Why not try it?
I would go as far to say as it is your job in 2021. It is your if you're wearing only Nike shoes to go grocery shopping because your contract extends to any public appearance, then I think all bets are off, and you can be a force for good as much of a force for capitalist excess at this point, right?
Yeah.
So
I'm actually kind of shifting. Hearing you talk, I'm kind of shifting towards that. I would think they should start stepping up.
Yeah.
Here, so we've got a couple minutes left. Again, massive thank you guys for spending time with me today, having this chat. This has been fantastic. Jeffrey, of course,
thanks for having us. Yeah,
thanks for having us.
Now, before we let you go, now we're going to put you on the spot. This is where things get real, okay?
Oh, wow.
So this was all a preview, okay? World Cup qualifying.
Okay.
Who is going to get through in the CONCACAF qualifying? Who are your choices for getting through? I'll start with you, Tobes.
I think that watching this tournament, at least, it seems to me that there's a top 3, maybe a top 2 and a third. Sorry, Canada, but maybe a top 3 even. All 3 of us, Mexico, the United States, and Canada, I think should be the front runners for those 3 spots. And then I really, coming in this tournament, thought Jamaica was maybe 3rd ahead of Canada or 4th. But watching this tournament, they're not even that close. Costa Rica is aging. Their best players can't really seem to keep it together over the course of a longer tournament anymore. Honduras was pretty good in the Nations League. Maybe Honduras is that 4th team that we're looking at for that intercontinental playoff, or maybe Jamaica gets their stuff together and it's Jamaica. But I would probably say those 3, and then either Honduras or Jamaica for the 4th spot.
I absolutely agree with everything you've said. My picks would have been exactly the same.
Easy, love it. I mean, think of it like I'm not trying to get too far ahead of us, but think of how cool it is to have this conversation. You know, a fan who's not even a Canadian fan, and you go, you know, I think Canada is going to make it to the World Cup. That is a cool conversation, and
it's a very cool conversation. I mean, again, I think we've proven it on the field of play. Yeah, we're back.
Apologies.
No worries. I was doing interpretive dance there for a bit. I was busting out some spoken word. It was awesome.
Yeah, I apologize, Jeffrey. The melon. This I can say safely. This wasn't even my fault. It was just melon dropping. So.
We don't have an equivalent for that with StreamYard. We use StreamYard, but this is a very similar interface. So
yeah, it's very similar. Melon has been pretty good. Been pretty happy with it, but it's one of those things where I think they've added so many new accounts. It's like Zoom when it first started. Everyone keeps overflowing it. Anyway, we'll just quickly jump back in and we'll end your thoughts here, and then we'll wrap it up. Tobes,
okay.
Sorry about that, buddy.
No worries.
The platform drop, nothing that you guys did. It was absolutely just melon dropping there. So
it was us spitting hot fire. We broke the internet. It's unbelievable.
Exactly. Good. Oh, and of course, Offside Twice is here, so you can give him some shit in the chat there, Jeffrey, if you want to.
No, he's just he was talking about my beard, but Tobes' beard beats it without question. Tobes' beard beats my beard. I'm so sick of my beard, but until I get a haircut, I don't even want to know what my face looks like. So, yeah.
It's let's be edited into a podcast then. So let's wrap up. Again, big thank you guys for coming on to the show. This has been a really, really good conversation. I think we've all agreed that we're going to see, Canada and the States in the World Cup together. Hopefully not in the same group. And that will be a really good time. But before we guys leave, I always love to give the guests an opportunity to talk about where people can connect with them, where they're at most recently. Jeffrey, what's going on with Waking the Red? What are you doing yourself? Where can people connect with you?
I mean, we do our show every Tuesday, live like yours, 12:15, and then it goes out to the. I'm just looking at the chat. It goes out to all the usual places. So not Twitch, but that's your purview. We do YouTube and all the other stuff. Waking the Red, we cover TFC, we cover the Canadian men's and women's national teams, we cover CPL, but quite a few of our former writers and editors have moved on to positions of prestige at the CPL. So we like to leave them to do that more often. So basically perspectives on CanSoc, and then can tell you about the stuff I do in my other life, but it would bore you to tears because it's a lot of editing science fiction shows right now. So I mean, I'm on Twitter all the time. I'm on the social medias all the time. I'm extremely online because 2 years of COVID have made me a glorified agoraphobe at this point. I'm looking forward to getting outside and doing stuff again. But until then, you can catch me on the internets.
And before we go to you, Tobes, there's a comment in the chat that I just want to highlight here. Offside Twice mentions, why has Jeffrey not moved on to Prestige? What's going on there, Jeffrey?
What's Prestige? oh, CPL.
CPL.
I don't know. I'm a busy boy. It's too busy. Those cats are. It's a 24-hour commitment. KJ's running a tight ship now. They're cranking out content like nobody's business, and it's all really quality content. The CPL, for anybody that isn't familiar, you follow Valor, right? I see the Red River Rising scarf behind you. I'm sorry I didn't get to meet you. I was in Winnipeg for 2019. I was doing a Hallmark. I met Nikki and all the Red River Rising cats. Went to a game at King's Head. Actually caught a game at IG Field. I'm a Forge guy, but Valor. I'm so pleased you guys have a team now. But I'm really upset that Bustos left, because Bustos on that side would have been pure magic.
Would have been magic, yeah.
Pure magic. But speaking of identity, it's really nice because Valor, it was a long game. The first 2 seasons, you were a mess, but you knew that Coach Gale had an idea, and it's so nice to see it come into fruition, right? It's a testament to the systems guy, right? Because with TFC, we just had a situation where we hired Chris Armas in the middle of a pandemic, maybe a target of opportunity, who knows? But a systems guy coming in under that kind of pressure made absolutely no sense. So it's nice to see a systems guy. Like it was an existential crisis for me. I'm like, why do systems coaches exist if it's always going to be such a struggle whenever they're hired? So it's very nice to see a systems guy have some success after playing the long game.
Yeah, and it feels good as a Valor supporter. I know Nikki and the rest of Red River Rising would agree. We're happy to be chanting the things that we're going to be chanting this year for sure.
Absolutely.
Tobes, big thank you again for coming onto the show, providing that American perspective. The knowledge has been fantastic. We really appreciate being on there. And the beard, of course, looking fantastic. Tobes, where can people find you, connect with you these days?
In Tajon Buchanan's DMs. I'll be there asking him to help some of our players figure out some stuff. I'm on Twitter and Twitch. I haven't been on Twitch recently, but I'm hoping to get back into my Football Manager save where I try to get the most out of some of these American guys. But mostly on Twitter. I have a Discord. I'm in Scoot's Discord sometimes. That's pretty much everywhere for me.
You can find him anywhere if you want to pick his brain. So thank you for both of you coming on today. Really do appreciate it. Apologies for the technical issues there at the end, but we'd love to have you guys on again in the future. Thank you so much for your time.
Anytime. Cheers.
Thank you.
All the best, guys.
Have a good one.
That was Jeffrey P. Nesker and TobesLeroney talking about the Gold Cup. Lots to talk about. It was a very good round table. Really do appreciate their time today. So next up, we're going to be bringing in Kristin Knowles. She's a friend of a friend. She's also a member of the Vocal Minority podcast, which is a podcast that covers Canadian soccer, TFC, and a number of different topics been going on for quite some time. I'm really excited to have her on the show. So we're going to go ahead and bring her on now. Let's see if this is working. Kristin, can you hear me? Nope, just one moment. We'll see if we can get Kristin on here. Are you able to hear me there, Kristin? If you can try going down just the bottom of the screen there, and there's a little toggle beside the mute button. if you go up and choose the microphone and the audio output input, just to see if it's the right ones, or I can always maybe try refreshing again. Apologies. I think the Melon app crashing here caused some of this. So apologies for those who are hanging out. I appreciate you watching. I'm just going to mark another edit here. Any luck changing the settings there? Just one moment. Always got to make sure it's not my headset, which it isn't. It was on. Nothing to change. Weirdly not hearing anything right now. Apologies, guys. Just give me a moment here. Yeah, she's just going to try refreshing and see if this works. Thanks for jumping in there, Simon. Good to see you. There we go. So next up on, I'm just going to reset just so it's easier to edit. I'm so lazy like that. So we're going to try this one more time. 123, Kristin edit. Okay. So next up on the show, we have Kristin Knowles. She's a member of the Vocal Minority podcast and is an avid follower of the Canadian women's national team. We'll be talking a little bit about the Canadian women's team at the Olympics, the upcoming game against the States of the semifinal, and of course the big win over Brazil in the quarterfinals. Let's go ahead and bring her in. Kristin, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yay!
There we go. Perfect.
We got it.
Thank you very much.
I was starting to get worried.
I appreciate you working through that with me. I think the entire platform that I was using here decided to take a break.
Yeah.
And we're all good now. So appreciate you being here, taking the time. Love the kit.
Thank you.
I need to get myself sorted. All I have is this, the old.
That's not a bad shirt to wear. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Was the quick little story. I always like sharing this, but I was never a massive football, like soccer fan. I always paid attention to some of the bigger tournaments, but when the World Cup came to Winnipeg and I got the chance to go see the Women's World Cup in person, it's planted a seed. And that went into the Football Manager, and then before you knew it, I was reaching out to clubs overseas, and now I can't imagine my life any other way. So
it's amazing what sort of like the influence, the little drop in the ocean that changes your mind. Or that's why we always encourage people to bring friends to games. Oh, they're not really into it. Bring them to games. And so many people be like, my friend brought me to a game, and that was all it took. So that's what we hope for. That's what we want. So it's great. It's great to hear that.
Yeah, I do. I try to drag as many as my friends to the Valor games as I can. I mean, not only do we have the space in that 32,000 seat for a lot more folks to show up, but me and my buddy Ugo, we have a dream of seeing that lower bowl full for every Valor game, and just
that would be amazing.
That energy. Yeah,
that would be great.
So one person at a time, we'll get there. But thank you very much for taking the time today, Kristin. I really do appreciate it. A member of the Vocal Minority podcast and a Canadian soccer nut, I think is fair to say. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Could you tell us a little bit about the Vocal Minority podcast? For those who aren't familiar with it, it's been around for actually quite some time. You guys have pumped out
over 7 years.
Years and years and years.
Over 7.
How did that start?
So that started basically, we all had fairly active Twitter accounts, and we all wrote for different blogs. Two of us, like I had my own blog. Duncan was the editor of Waking the Red. Tony and Mark had the Yorkies, and then I was writing for Waking the Red. And we had a lot of banter, both in comments and online, and just back and forth. And people hung out with us at matches because we all stood together at matches as well. And someone basically said, why don't you guys have a podcast? Like, we would love to hear this all the time, sort of thing. We want to hear more. And we're like, interesting. So we did sort of a trial one. We just, okay, we'll get together. Let's record something, see what we think. And it came together and we're like, well, that's not bad. Maybe we should do this. So we foolishly did, and we haven't stopped. So yeah, it's we call ourselves a nonsense podcast because while we are very serious about the game of football, it's our biggest passion for all four of us, I would say, especially for sports. It's, you know, the malarkey aspect of it is a big part of it as well. We have a tendency to tangent, and it is at its core, it's like hanging out with us at a match, because this is what we do. It's basically what we do. We just, you know, we come up with random opinions and thoughts. Someone will just be like, oh, hey, this reminded me of this. And then you talk about that for 5 minutes while trying to watch the match. And that's what we do for, you know, hour and a half, 2 hours. It's not a short podcast. But apparently during this last year, that's been really helpful. Like to have, we're helping. We're helping people cope by having long podcasts.
Yeah. You know what? It's something that once you get into it and you find folks that you just love talking to and you're shooting the shit with them on a day-to-day basis,
Yep.
It's like, why not just throw it in a podcast, right? Like it's great to listen to. And for those who don't know, I dropped the link in the chat there, vocalminority.ca.
Oh, cheers.
They're on episode 374, which is an astounding achievement. That's great, guys, to keep that going, keep that consistency. And you haven't got sick of each other yet, which is another fantastic thing.
Well, that is amazing. We are all really, really good friends, and they are, you know, they are the people that I like to spend my time with. Now we've had to do it remotely for the last year and a half, but you know, go to games together, we hang out together, we chat, it's just, yeah, these are your people, right? Like that's the great thing about football is you find your people.
You really do. You really do find your people. Here's a question for you. So was football always a love for you? Was that something you grew up loving? Was it something that was introduced to you young, or did you grow into the sport? How did you become a big football fan?
Quite by accident. Well, from that sense, like a lot of people I know that I'm friends with grew up in football households. Like their parents were into it, or they, you know, they come from a background that really is really into it. That wasn't my case. I grew up in you know, very much into sports. You know, I was raised on, you know, basketball and baseball, basically. But you know, my folks, my dad, I think he just wanted to get my brother and I out of his hair one summer, I think was the key for a little while, just a little while. So he enrolled us in soccer in a summer league. I was like 8 or 9, 8, I think. I was hooked. Like that was it. I was just like, this is great. I love this. And I played, I just kept playing. I played for, you know, whatever, 10, 11 years, and, you know, found friends when I got older who's came from soccer backgrounds. So then I got exposed to the global game as opposed to just like very much in a bubble. Like it, you know, I grew up in Peterborough. There wasn't a lot of international soccer when you're an 8-year-old in Peterborough. But yeah, so started watching EPL and then World Cups I always watched. And then it just went from there. I moved to Toronto and eventually, you know, from TFC, got into physically and really actively supporting Canada because of BMO Field, because of the National Soccer Stadium, and having matches to go to. But again, meeting the community, getting involved in the community, which was huge and life-changing for me to have this as a major part of my existence. And it is to this day. And I can't imagine my life without it.
And it's something, you know, you touched on it there. You're finding your community, right? You're finding that space. To me, what I've found as I've kind of got involved in the Canadian soccer community is this really tight-knit, well-woven community of folks that seem to know everybody else, even if it's through someone else, you know them.
Yep.
And there's this camaraderie and love that I've felt, you know, and I'm talking a bit about myself here, but it's been astoundingly different than being a hockey fan. Like you see that I have a Jets hat on. Obviously we're in Canada, that hockey's a thing, but I've never felt that camaraderie with other Jets fans. I've felt camaraderie with friends and family, but going to the ground and going to a whole section where it feels like you're surrounded by people who see it the same way as you do and just are there for the same reason and feel that same vibe. It's such a unique feeling. It's hard to describe.
No, and that's it. And someone, people always ask, well, what got you into supporting Canadian soccer? What was your first Canadian soccer match? And mine was way back 2007, 2008. And it was quite by accident. It was just, again, the matches were there. Someone suggested it and again, I didn't know very many people in the early days of going to TFC. This was the first team I fully supported as my own. We all have adopted teams because you don't have anything local, right? So, but you meet like one person online or one person in the stand who's like, oh, well, there's this is coming up. You should go to that. And then, even if you're just sort of like in the back of the section or near the section, kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing. But the first time you go to a pre-match or the first time you really interact with somebody on social media, we're just happy. We're just happy that you're there and that you want to join in and that you want to do this, no matter how committed or how crazy you want to get. Do you want to be at the front of the section? Awesome. Do you want to stand 3 sections over? No problem. We don't care. Are you here because you love soccer and you love Canada? Freaking fantastic. That is what we want. And that is the thing that struck me right away was how welcoming the entire community was and how much it was just like, hey, you're here.
You're interested? Come on.
This is exactly. You want to go out with us? You can sit with us. You can totally sit with us. We don't care what you're wearing. Oh, well, we would prefer that you wear like something like this, but that's okay too. We don't care. Just come hang out with us. And it's really important, like as a Canadian soccer supporter and as somebody who's really involved in the Voyageurs, that we do that we make everyone feel as welcome as possible because they are. You like Canadian soccer? Guess what? You're a Canadian soccer supporter and you're basically a member of the Voyageurs already.
Yeah, it's what I think it's the most welcoming community of supporters or fans that I think I've ever been part of. And there really is a joy when you meet a supporter and you mention that you might have, meet a casual friend. They mention, oh, I watched the game. You watched it?
Exactly.
Oh, what do you want to talk about? And suddenly you're pouring. If you've seen the meme of the guy pouring out a cup that just overflowing, that's me whenever someone mentions anything around Canadian soccer. Suddenly I'm just dumping all of my interests on them, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned BMO Field. I mean, it must be nice to be able to be that close to be able to go see games of the national team. It was something of a dream to be able to have the World Cup here in Winnipeg and see it. Unfortunately, we don't have the same type of facility. It's a turf ground, right? It's not going to get the same type of games. It's on the bucket list to head out for Toronto. Here's a question for you. You mentioned sitting front, back. Whereabouts do you sit? What would you recommend for someone heading to the first time to go see a Canadian game?
Oh, geez. Like I'm usually somewhere near the front for Canada matches, which is different than what I do for TFC for club matches. I'm like at the back of a section. Like I'm in the supporter, but I'm just like, yeah, I'll just be back here. We just like to do our own thing. But for Canada, it brings out something different in me, and I want to be like right in it. So I'm usually within the first 5 rows of the section, of the supporter section. And it really, there's no wrong places, but if you're going to be near the front, we do ask that it's people who are willing to be animated and really into it for 90 minutes, just because that's what the players see and that's what we're trying to portray. Not that you can't come down there if you're feeling a little quiet that day. That's okay too. But come to the supporter section, anywhere in the supporter section, or sit a section over if you're like, maybe that's not for me this week. There's no wrong answer. Everyone's going to be welcoming. Everyone's going to be like, oh yeah, here, do you know this chant? And it's easy because we all know the chants. Although there is a new one coming, so stay tuned. But you can stand anywhere in the south end of BMO Field or wherever the supporter section is, because not all national team games are in Toronto, much to contrary to popular belief. I have traveled to other cities for national team games. It does happen. Yeah. And I was sad. I was supposed to go to Winnipeg for the Women's World Cup and I couldn't make it. My ticket is still on my wall with some of my Canadian soccer paraphernalia as sort of a sad memory. Now I went to other games, but I didn't make my Winnipeg match, which made me sad.
Well, you know, there's a lovely lovely club here. If you ever want to see a Valor game, I'm sure Nikki
Oh no,
and
are
Red
you
River
kidding?
Rising would bring you in, no
I'm gonna
problem.
stay on Nikki's floor. All right, that's done. I'm just like, Nikki, I'm coming.
And
I
for
need a
those who
place to
don't know,
stay.
Nikki is the lead of the Red River Rising supporter group, a really fantastic supporting group for Valor. And it epitomizes a lot of what we're talking about, the welcoming, bringing people in, people who sometimes have not been involved in the sport before, to those who are absolute nuts and moved from another country looking for that supporters group, right? So, yeah, it's been amazing. Before we jump into the Canadian women's team, I have one more question for you. I always like to
Yeah.
learn a little bit more about, you know, just when you grew up. You mentioned you started to follow the EPL clubs overseas. Did you have a favorite club, or were you like a neutral, kind of like me, just you're happy to watch whatever's on?
Well, I didn't really up until I was probably like late elementary school, high school. I hadn't watched any EPL games because we didn't have those channels. So I had to rely on watching it with friends whose families were big. And so one of my best friends for well, many years, her family was English, and they were Manchester United supporters. So that was my first like official team that I supported, because this was the only team I knew about that people watched. Everyone talked about. If I went to my friend's house, these were the matches we were watching. But I used to follow like the box scores in the paper because that was cool, you know, because I'm old and that's what we did back then. And so yeah, I would look for that. But there was a couple other teams that I followed as well. The first time I saw Peterborough United, I was like, but that's where I live. And because that's where I grew up. So I sort of followed them because I was just so fascinated that there was another Peterborough. Again, I'm like 9. I don't really know much. And then Tottenham. And the reason why is a really long story, but has to do with Bloom County, which is a hilarious comic strip that if you've never seen, you should read. But anyway, so there was a couple teams that caught my eye, and then I would like follow like the Bundesliga too. I think I picked a couple random teams. Again, I was just like, this name sounds cool. I'm going to follow them. And so I was a United supporter for a long time, and then many years back I switched my allegiance full time to Spurs. So that's where I've landed, but still a posh supporter. So excited for them. So excited for them. They went back up again this year. It's amazing. It's going to be good.
It's, you know, I love that little bit you mentioned, though, just the idea that it's the same name, right? And when I first started getting into, you know, a little bit of football manager, you know, it was like, hey, a lot of these are the same names as places in Canada. And then you realize, as well as, of course, because immigration, they brought the same names. They wanted to kind of name it after a town they were from, those sorts of things, right? So I always laugh whenever I see Halifax. First thought I think is, oh, it must be Nova Scotia. Like, it couldn't be anything else, right?
Yeah.
Got a question for you in chat here. Actually, I do like to bring in a couple of questions from the conversation when it's applicable. Into Rosie asks, Kristin, has your love of football increased since the Canadian Premier League has been set up, or has been a factor for you at all?
No. It's hard to increase my love of football. Like this is a lifelong thing for me. This is the vast majority of my life. It has made me happy as a Canadian soccer fan. Like, we've been wanting this for so long. And so I am thrilled that it exists and that we have it, and that we have this league of our own to support and to give opportunities to Canadian soccer players, and to further the development of the men's program, introduce soccer to young people. Like, it ultimately, it will have such a huge effect on the sport in Canada. So it doesn't change my love of the sport, but it just makes me happy that the infrastructure is here now, that there is something for us to build on and build up.
Yeah, I think it felt like there was something missing. And for those, I always like to point it out, you know, it was a learning experience for me to go, oh, this new league is coming, right? And as I kind of got into it, I went into Wikipedia and I looked at defunct soccer leagues in North America. And the list is insane. Like,
There's
it is
so many.
It's
And
massive,
so
right?
many are here. It's so sad.
It's sad, right? And you want this to succeed for all the reasons you mentioned, right? It's about the youth, it's about the development, it's about the growth of the sport. And the fact that the sport is, you know, incredibly accessible, it's incredibly popular on the amateur side. Like, and to me, I think it's the future top league of, I'm a little biased, but I think it's the future top league of the nation. I'd like to think in 10, 20 years from now, the sports that are the most accessible are going to be the ones that are the most popular. But
yep. Well, that's one of the beauties about football, right? Is that it's at its core, it's the working people's sport, right? All you need is some grass and a ball. Yeah. Like that's literally all you need. You don't even need to play on grass. You can play on dirt if you want to. I don't recommend it. It hurts. But it's, now that's one of the, and this is a much longer conversation. That's one of the issues with sport in North America and around the world, regardless of the sport, is how expensive it's become at all levels. Like I literally played, in my old, God, they weren't Adidas. I don't know what they were, just whatever random, runners I wore as a kid until I got a proper pair of boots. And, that was it. Like, but it wasn't that I wasn't going to coaches or anything like that. And I played a lot of sports as a kid. I did the same thing. I did gymnastics. I did soccer. I played basketball. I played I swam competitively, like all these things. Right. And knowing what the cost was, or the sort of the lower level cost, even if you were playing more competitively and actually were in a program compared to what it is now, it just blows my mind. But again, at its core, it doesn't require special equipment. You don't need all of these things to play this sport and to enjoy it. And it's universal. It's played around the world. It is truly the global game. And so it makes a huge difference. And to have it somewhat shifted finally, maybe within the country, is something that's really exciting. But yeah, it's really interesting to see how it slowly seesaws back and forth, and maybe success of two programs will help push that, because that's what always happens, right? There's this little, it's like the world's weirdest roller coaster. It's like, a little hill, okay, now we go down like 1200 leagues, we're slowly, and we're back again, oh no, we've gone down another hill. And hopefully we are still like, we're going up a really big hill, and it's just going to keep going. We're going to do loop-de-loops instead of crashing all the way down. Before we go on, I'm just curious, and please answer in the chat, into Rosette. Dare I ask who you support? Because apparently I've disappointed somebody with my footballing allegiance in the English Premier League. So
Interrosie is a friend of mine. He's from Ireland. I can tell you exactly what.
Is it who I think it is?
He's an Arsenal fan.
See,
it's one of those things, I don't have a team. My English team is Weymouth.
That's the best way to do it. That's the best way to do it.
But I'll tell you, if Weymouth ever plays Arsenal, he'll know that I won't be on his side for that one. So. Dreams. Big thank you to Haza for the raid coming in there. But yeah, he's an Arsenal fan, so don't even take him too seriously. He's a good guy. He just wants to give you a little bit of shit.
Oh,
the banter is part of it, is it not? Like that's part of
basically they that's your welcome package. Exactly. And this is what's going to happen. Exactly. Oh God, now Nesker's in on this. Jesus Lord. Okay, I'm not looking at the chat anymore.
I will say that the banter part, it was something it as a Valor fan, you learned very quickly to have some patience and some understanding and the ability to have some thick skin. And then
TFC fan here from the beginning. So
yeah,
also Canada soccer fan, but
exactly tortured a little bit, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So speaking of the Canadian women's team,
not
tortured. Fantastic result last night, beating Brazil in the quarterfinals in pens to go to a semi-final against our nemesis, the rival, the Americans. What was your thoughts on the game last night? That
was, for the most part, a good game. It wasn't a great game until the penalties. It's sort of like it's kind of a microcosm of their whole tournament. Although this game was better defensively than the last, but some strong defensive play. Although again, this tournament hasn't been their strongest defensive showing. Some wonderful runs down the wings. The beautiful Ashley Lawrence, who can do no wrong. Quinn in the midfield. Oh, I love them so much. And, Steph Labbe still playing injured, but showing just what a world-class keeper she is. Kadisha Buchanan, like what possibly I think her best match of the tournament. But then you still have this trouble with the transition from the midfield to the attacking third with this team right now, and it's really frustrating. And so there's so much good. There's so much good in watching them play, and there's so much to enjoy, and to see how they've done this year, and to see what Priestman has done with integrating some of the younger players and slowly transitioning this club away from the veterans that we've been watching for a really long time, because they play for a really long time. Not that I want them all shoved out into the pasture. I don't. I appreciate that so many of them still play at such a high level, but I also appreciate seeing some of the younger faces getting time. And Olympic squads are hard, right? Because of the restrictions. Even with allowing, the alternates to be part of the squad, it's still lower than any other international squad for any other tournament. And it's stupid, shall we say. So even with that, there's still, there's people that didn't travel. I think that this attacking thing, and we've been talking about it and talking about it and talking about it for months. And it showed up again last night, right? Like the ability is there. It's just they hesitate on the shots. The transition's not right. People are making runs that aren't expected, or a run is too fast, or run is too slow. And for whatever reason, they just don't seem to have this connection. And it's frustrating because we have some of the best attacking players in the world. Or certainly in North America, but I would stack some of our players up there as world class who play in the top leagues in the world. And one I'll single out is Janine Becky, who I adore. Janine Becky is a really cool person, not just a really excellent footballer. She's a really interesting person. And if you've never watched her YouTube show, I highly recommend it. It's very good. Brews with Becky. And when she scored, after that penalty, the missed penalty against Costa Rica, but when she did not drop her head, when she came back, she scored those goals. Not Costa Rica, Chile. I was so pleased because I was like, okay, good. She's broken out of her funk. She's got the taste for it now. She's, they figured out how to get the ball to her and that sort of thing. And you can see the ideas, you can see what she's trying to do, and it's just not coming together. So it's such a weird thing with this squad. They're very talented, and they have been knocking on the door of being one of the top women's squads for a few years now. And this last 6 months, She Believes tournament was huge for them. Plus the friendlies afterwards. And again, they're friendlies, but these are competitive people, and they were all trying to prepare for the Olympics. So nobody was shirking their duties. So yeah, this tournament has shown both sides of it for me, in that they have all this midfield power. They have this power on the wings. They have a really strong defense that has been a little shaky. But there's still this difficult with this transition into the attack. And I don't know what the answer is. Well, one of the answers is to put Ashley Lawrence in the midfield. I know I'm not the only one that thinks this, and I've been saying this for ages. And the games in the last 6 to 8 months in which they've been the most successful is when Ashley Lawrence is actually penciled in, put in as a midfielder, not as an attacking fullback, and it makes a difference. She makes a difference. Not that the rest of them don't, but she's been extraordinary for them recently, and it has been really enjoyable. And I think that that's a transition they really need to look into, and really need to consider making that as a permanent shift.
What kind of role does she play in the midfield when she's playing in the mid there? It's
because of she has such a dynamic force to her play, because she moves unexpectedly. I don't think they expect the fact that she's going to make a cutting run, or that she has a really good field sense, and better than people give her credit for. But you watch her game, you see the crosses she sends in, you see how she reads where her teammates are, it really changes the shape. You've got Scott, who is, she's a tough cookie, right? And she can play some pretty football too, but she is, she's a defensive midfielder, and she's one of the best. And there's a beautiful aspect to her game, but that's her job. And Quinn is somewhere sort of in the middle. They are very good with the ball at their feet. Really nice crosser as well. And although in this match this morning, they, little attempt at the goal. Why not? I'm all for that. I like the thought of attacking Quinn. That makes me happy. I love seeing them get more advanced, because I kind of look at them as like a step below Ashley in that, that Lawrence is more, she's just more the forward player. Quinn is more a little bit sit back and behind the attack. But if you've seen them play together, the matches in which the two of them are in the midfield, or in the matches in which Priestman has moved Lawrence up to the midfield with Quinn, has been such a difference, because the two of them play off each other very well. So Quinn takes care of a little more of the defensive, a little more of getting the ball away and moving it around, whereas Lawrence takes care of transitioning that into the attack, and it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems to really address what you had mentioned, that disconnect between, the midfield and the final third. It seems like she would kind of naturally take care of that concern, really bring the ball forward for them. So Brazil game, fantastic. A game that when we were going into it, I remember there was a poll put out. I don't know if you saw it, where it was a FIFA was like, look, who's going to win? And Brazil had like 97% of the vote.
Oh, that poll. Yeah. Canada had like 7%. And I was like, excuse me.
Excuse me? Come on now. Like, this isn't, this is a serious team.
This isn't 2 years ago.
Exactly.
This isn't 4 years ago.
Exactly. So now that they've beat Brazil, now they can really start thinking about what a matchup that's coming up. This is a matchup that's not only for the fans, but also for the players. This is a matchup that is filled with intensity.
Revenge.
There's revenge storylines. There's a whole, and some of these girls, we've seen it where they just don't really like each other when they play against each other. There's a competitive edge on both sides of these squads that builds into a really fantastic match. What are you expecting to see in the US-Canada match? What are you hoping to see, and what do you think that result is going to end up being?
I'm expecting to see a lot of fouls. It's not going to be, and it will. It's going to be a physical match, and it usually is between these two sides. You bring up, like the competitive nature. A lot of them already play. Well, it's interesting, right? Like that's the thing with especially with women's sport right now, women's football right now, is that there's still so few proper leagues for them to play in. So they all play with each other or against each other. So a lot of them know each other's games quite well. And like you saw Christine Sinclair and Marta, hugging after the match, sort of like consoling, celebrating together, because they played together and played against each other. And it's this weird nature of sport. But there is a history. There's a long history. There's so many histories. There's, of course, the Olympic history. Oh, never going to forgive. Never going to forgive. It's not going away. It's like Atiba being onside. It's one of these Canadian soccer supporter hallmarks, and we don't forget, and we don't forgive easily. But I expect, these are never nice games between the two. And you don't just get a lot of free-flowing, pretty football, no matter who's playing, no matter the quality on the pitch. These are grinding, kicking, shoving matches. And they're hard to watch in a lot of cases because the talent, but there's so much emotion, and it just always seems to end up that way between the two sides. And it happens with the men's team as well, which I always find really interesting. And again, it's the underlying emotion, I think, that the desire is just to literally beat each other. So you're going to see a lot of fouls. The midfield will be hugely important. Both sides have such strong players. And I hope we will see Christine Sinclair. I'm hoping she's not truly injured after what happened today. There's a couple players actually that suffered. Steph LeBay again. Steph was roughed up really several times in this match. That last fall from height, like I felt that ricocheted for me, and she's already dealing with a broken rib, right? So, but you want her in net. Like you could put Kaylin Sheridan in. Hell, you could put Erin McLeod in. Give Erin McLeod a little redemption story, but she's not seen a minute for ages. But I think you're going to see a lot of. It's not going to be high scoring. I don't think. I know there's the potential is it for it to be high scoring match, but this is also, again, this isn't Canada or US of last year, the year before, 5 years ago. These are different squads, and the talent is closer to being even. On paper, the Americans are probably still slightly the better team, but that doesn't mean they're not beatable, because they absolutely are. Like, this is a winnable match for the Canadian women. And I know they're going into it knowing that. And the fans should too. They should be fully on board and fully on the side of the Canadian women for this match, because this isn't, oh, well, that was fun. We'll play for the bronze again. No. We're going into this and we're going for that final. We want a different freaking medal. And it's absolutely a possibility. Like, it's a big possibility. I'm not going into this match doom and gloom.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. I think this is an opportunity. We've seen the women's team do really, really well, and then they hit that moment of a tough game, or they're in a quarterfinal or a semifinal, and there's that kind of, oh well, they did well enough. And it's like, you can only do that or have that conversation for so long. These players want to beat that hump. They want to break through that ceiling that we've apparently imposed on them for some reason. We want a gold. We want to see them in the gold medal final. I think that would be an incredible achievement, to get to that game. And I think, not trying to look past the States, I think they're a team that we can beat. I agree with you. I think they're probably the favorites, but not favorites by a huge margin. And I think it's know that.
Yeah, it's not like I said, it's not even like a year ago or 2 years ago where it's like, oh, well, it's been fun. Thanks.
Yep.
All right.
It was nice watching. Yay.
Good. We'll watch, but good shot. It is different. It is changing. More needs to happen for it to change more quickly and more consistently, but it's changing.
Yeah, and that's something that I do hope to do a show on in the future, bring on a few folks to talk about, the path to pro in Canada for women comparative to men. Like, obviously,
what path?
Exactly that. What path? That's a gap that needs to be addressed. And if we want to continue to support this team and see them grow, you look at France and Spain and some of these other nations and what they're doing and the support for their women's leagues, like.
And they've changed the face of football in their countries by doing this. Now, like I'll talk about the Brazilian women are a great example, as are the Mexican women. But like the Brazilian women, and their federation, they have to fight their federation all the freaking time. They still have to fight their federation, but the support for that team from the public is huge. But I know we have to go soon, but I do want to talk about that really quickly.
Yeah,
is that this need for a league or for professional women's teams in Canada? Like, you cannot underscore this enough. You cannot emphasize it enough. Circle it, put stars around it. Make this part of your conversation when you're talking about women's football, Canadian women's football, because the fact that they're managing to achieve what they are with them playing in the States in the NWSL, with them playing in the EPL, with them playing in France, with them playing in Nordic countries, that sort of thing, is remarkable. But it's not sustainable, because you lose a pathway for so many young players, and you also lose an opportunity to build familiarity. And when everyone is, you've got 2 players on City, and you've got a couple players on the Thorns, and someone playing for the Reign, and someone playing for Angel FC whenever they start, like all these things, right? Like there's, PSG and Lyon, like there's little pockets, but that's it. And yes, they're getting high level play, and it's amazing. And it's important that they play in those leagues, but it's equally important that there is a pathway here. And whether it is, and I've been talking about this for, I've lost track of how long I've been talking about this. And I've talked to people in charge at TFC, and they mouth pretty words about it. Oh, we're totally someday thinking about looking into it, and that's really what it is, right? Like it's a someday they'll maybe think about looking into it. I don't ever consider them to ever be serious about it, and I don't see the same. I don't see that from any of the MLS sides in Canada, and then the CanPL. Yes, it's a nascent league, it's a brand new league, but that should be already part of their business model. Like it should be, okay, we have this set to go. And I don't believe that is the case there either. And it's not a knock on, no, it's not true. It doesn't knock on the CPL. But everyone keeps talking about, oh, well, it has to be profitable first. It's not going to be profitable for like a fucking decade. Oh, I'm sorry. Apologize.
This is a dirty podcast.
Oh man, I've been censoring myself. I swear like a fucking pirate. If you've ever listened to my show, this is true. I'm the sweariest one of the four of them. I get host privilege. I just get to swear a lot. It makes me crazy when people talk about how it has to be profitable. You name me a single sporting league that started profitable. Go on. I'll wait. Especially
the Canadian Premier League hasn't shared their numbers with everyone, because I doubt that they're
but they're not. It's not intended to be profitable right away. It never is. It's not how these things work. As much as I would love to see it work that way, I would love for something to just instantly be profitable. That would be amazing when it comes to sport, but it's so rare that it ever is. That is purpose, right? Into Rosette. That's amazing. I love that. But it's if the leagues aren't going to do this, and MLS is its own giant ball of madness and stupidity, and I say that as someone who supports an MLS side, and CanPL it's also, we could do a whole show. I do a whole show every week about my frustrations with that. So we're not going to see a women's side, and you have League One Ontario doing great work. The BC Soccer, they've had some issues, and maybe we don't want to talk about their women's program right now until they fix everything. But we need NWSL franchises in Canada. And as much as I would love to see a purely Canadian from the start league, it's not going to happen anytime soon. It's just not. And unless someone is working very quietly behind the background, I've heard zero whispers about it. No one has said, but the interest, the desire to have professional women's soccer in Canada is huge. And Diana Matheson, recently retired Diana Matheson, wonderful Diana Matheson, Olympic hero Diana Matheson. Sorry, I could just heap compliments upon her tiny shoulders. She is very vocal, as are several of the Canadian, both former and current women's national team players. But she is incredibly vocal, and this is kind of her focus now, post playing, is to raise the profile and get professional soccer for women in Canada. And I think it's incredible, and support her in anything she tries to do with this. People, like, pay attention. If you see there's Twitter accounts online, there's podcasts that talk about it, there's people that write about this, like, pay attention, support this, keep it in the conversation, because if you want, the women draw more than the men, right? If you support soccer in Canada, but you only pay attention to the men, then you're not paying attention, because the quality has been so consistently high for the women. They bring the fans out. If you've ever gone to a match, who goes to more games? How packed are the stadiums for the women's match versus the men? And I say this as a fan of both programs. I go to both matches. I travel around for both matches, for both programs. But pay attention, and don't just be like, oh, women's soccer, because there's no such thing as, oh, women's soccer. These are talented athletes, and they deserve your respect and your support.
100%.
Sorry.
Agreed.
I
No,
don't know where that soapbox came from.
100% agreed. And I think it's something that I did want to touch on today. Obviously, there's a lot more we can talk about, but if you're a supporter of the Canadian Premier League and you believe that it's important for the path to pro for men, and you're not talking about the women, you're missing the entire point. And to me, if you're going to support one, then you have to support the other.
Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, these are Canadians. I don't care what the gender is. I'm supportive of their dream and their ability to do it. I can't even imagine how much money we put into other sports in this country and developing really well trotted paths, and people have seen success. We can do the same thing for the women's game. And I hope that, the ultimate dream would be to pull on a Valor FC kit and know that I'm going to see Valor the women play.
Yeah.
But
wouldn't that be brilliant?
Wouldn't that be amazing? Right?
Like that's, I will say, and because English soccer has not always done this. And again, it's because a lot of the Canadian women, like I watch a lot of NWSL, but I watch a lot of, the women's EPL as well, because so many of the Canadian women play there, not just because Shelina Zadorsky plays for Spurs, although she is their captain and she's magnificent. So I just want to say that. But again, the fact that, and yes, I know the Arsenal women are very good. Just be quiet, you lot. No, but the fact that the English Premier League has raised its level, but also that the teams who are fielding women's sides, who have now made this, are now actually funneling proper amounts of money and proper promotion and proper training grounds. Everyone uses the same grounds. Everyone uses the same stadium. The kits are the same. The social media crossovers, like it's so important. And to see it happening consistently now, like this last 2 years for women's football in England, huge difference. I watched not just because of pandemic, but because I could, because it was there and because they're focusing on it more and making it way more available. It was fantastic. I watched so much women's football this last year. It was wonderful. It was just wonderful. And NWSL too. Speaking of Twitch, watch it on Twitch. It's amazing. You can watch it on Twitch. You can't pay for CBS Online? Who can? Oh, you're in Canada. It doesn't matter. You can't watch it anyways. Fuck you. Oh, look, there's Twitch. Yep. Thank the freaking gods. So it's available. It's out there. And the quality is good. And it is, if you love football, watch both. Yep. It's good for you.
Absolutely. Like what I always say to friends is like, why are you always watching, this obscure league or this league or that? And it's just like, I don't care the division or the gender.
No.
If there's a live sport, if it's football and it's on,
I will watch it.
I've got Wikipedia open. I'm reading the history of the club. I want to find out more about it. It's just
last year when the Belarusian league was the only professional soccer league playing, we watched a lot of that. Our podcast did a weekly update on the Belarusian Premier League. One of my favorite football kits is from Dinamo Brest. It is gorgeous. It is one of the most beautiful kits you will ever see. It is our adopted team, Mark and I. It's simply the Brest, as we like to say. But we were like, the only live soccer in the entire world that we can watch right now? Done. We will watch this. We will promote the hell out of you guys. And we did for months. It was great.
Yeah, you weren't the only ones. I can remember that even in the football manager community, there was lots of people like, where can I get it? It was Belarusian football.
Yep.
Let's go. But you know what, Kristin? I hate to cut it short because we do have a short amount of time. I appreciate so much you coming on today. It's been a fantastic discussion.
Yeah,
let's do this again soon. I know we have other topics we could crack into
sure.
Have a longer conversation. So
I am always happy to talk at length about soccer, football.
Where can people find you if they want to connect with you? Obviously, the Vocal Minority podcast, vocalminority.ca, but
yeah. So I am big on Twitter. It's very easy to find me on Twitter at KZ Knowles on Twitters. The podcast is at Vocal Minority CA if you want to interact with us there. I also am often the person behind the Voyageurs Twitter. So if you are a Canadian soccer supporter and you like you like Twitter and you're just wondering who that is, who is going on and on and on at the Voyageurs on the Twitters. So those are the best places to find me. I'm occasionally on Instagram or whatever, but I like my Twitter, and I'm almost always around. So I'm very easy to talk to. DMs are open if you want to chat. So
awesome. Big thank you, Kristin. Honestly, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time. I can't say it enough, but the show isn't about my knowledge. I don't have any. It's about bringing on interesting folks and having a chat with you. So really appreciate your time and enjoy the rest of your
thanks
day.
so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kristin. Talk soon.
All right. Cheers. Bye.
So that was Kristin Knowles of the Vocal Minority Podcast. What a fantastic interview. We went a little bit over time, so apologies, of course, if you're looking for CoachJeter. We're going to bring him in right away. The next guest, of course, is Andrew CoachJeter. He is a Twitch content creator as well as a swimming coach and a avid sports fan. We're going to bring him in for a little bit of picking his brain. So without further ado, welcome in, Andrew.
Hi, everyone.
How are you? Good to see you.
How are you? You as well. Nice to see you.
I appreciate you taking the time to join me today and allow me to pick your brain here on the show.
Yeah, of course. It's my pleasure. I really appreciate you having me and happy to discuss anything, although it's going to be tough to follow up that bit that I just watched.
Oh, you know what? Every guest says that, but at the end of the day, you know what? It's a fantastic show flowing into the next person. It's nice to have a little bit of variety, and we've talked a lot about Canadian soccer today, but it would be fun, I think, to pick your brain. You're a big sports guy. You're on Twitch. You're a Football Manager streamer. You play a few other games, but the reason that I brought you on, and maybe not everybody knows that the CoachJeter isn't just a connection to what you do on stream. It's actually you're actually a coach.
I am
in the swimming circles in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about maybe how, like, what your growing up was like? Well, what sports did you play? Did you swim when you were a kid?
Yeah. So, fun story is I was born like a month or so premature, and I was choking myself with my umbilical cord. So I had a bunch of issues with like tactile. Like I have super bad handwriting. I have a lot of fine motor issues. My mom was like, "Oh, well, the one thing that'll help you will be sports." So I literally went from like I was the most uncoordinated kid you could ever meet, like feet hitting each other, tripping on the floor. And my love for sports is the only reason I'm not that way. And I fell in love with all of it. I mean, my mom always says that I was basically like a walking ESPN that would just sit there and spew facts about anything and everything. I think my first love growing up was baseball, especially being in New York during a time when the Yankees were actually watchable. I loved watching the Yankees. I would put it on most nights. Like I could recite players' batting averages and home run counts, and like it was just second nature to me at that point in time. I then slowly kind of switched into following other sports. I really got into basketball. And the way that I found swimming was there's basically in the area that I live in, the county that I live in, there's a bunch of like clubs that do swimming. Like it's a bunch of country clubs and golf clubs and all that. And they all have pools, and they all just created a swim conference, and they all swim against each other. And I swam from the club that I went to. And we were not very good. There's 6 divisions. We were normally in the 4th. There is promotion and relegation. Magical that American sports have promotion relegation. But I swam from age 6 until 17, and then kind of picked up swimming more seriously when I got into high school. So I guess for those who don't know high school, I want to say I was 15, and picked it up then. And the high school that I went to had a really good swim program. We ranked 9th in the country when I was first a freshman. And I just got picked up as like, oh, we'll see. Maybe he does something. Maybe he doesn't. Got into it, trained a ton, and swam all 4 years. Was a New York State qualifier my senior year, and almost swam in college, but decided to pass on it and go to Georgetown instead.
So here's a question for you. So you talked about
ears.
swimming. What type of swimming? Obviously, as somebody who I didn't know a lot of the different strokes, the different ways that you can compete in the pool. I'm lucky enough to be married to someone who competed in the pool. She was a synchro competitor in Canada, and she's opened my eyes to how many different ways you can compete in the pool. What did you compete in primarily, or were you competing in everything?
I was kind of always conventional swimming. Water polo is not a big thing in the East Coast of the U.S. It's a much more West Coast thing. So I never was even like exposed to water polo until high school. Didn't do synchro swimming, and because I'm so tall, I could not dive. So swimming traditionally back and forth in the lanes was the only thing that I was really ever exposed to. Started, like I said, from a really young age. All these teams, the first competitive age group is 6 and under, so you can start at age 6. I mean, technically, I think I learned to swim at age 3, but like I was in the pool racing from age 6, and then just kind of stuck with it. Always really short distance, at least at first, until high school. I think as a little kid, my favorite was always breaststroke. When I got to high school and I started training more seriously, I turned into a distance swimmer. So my main events were the 200. I mean, not that this is distance, but by the end of it, I was 200-meter freestyle, 100-meter butterfly. But if I was going to go to college, there was a very good chance that I was going to turn into the 800-meter freestyle and possibly even the 1500. So I was a distance swimmer.
It's wild watching the Olympics as I'm doing this intro with you, seeing the swimming the last few weeks and just seeing the size of some of these guys. Like,
they are. I mean,
how tall people need to be to swim. And Hannah has mentioned to me with our young son Asher. He's tall. He's gonna be a tall kid. She's just like, oh, he could be a swimmer. He could be a swimmer. He's got all the size to be a swimmer, right? And it when I saw these guys walk out, even the women as well, tall, strong, big shoulders. Right?
Yeah.
Like, is that the type of physique is that just a long distance swimmer? Is that just
it depends. It depends on the stroke. Especially distance swimmers tend to be the 3 sports that I always get are: did you play basketball? Did you row? Or did you swim? And those are the 3 sports that like you need tall, big, broad shoulders. And that's just what it is. Part of the reason why, and this is really stupid, but with swimming, at least where most of where I swim, I was swimming in 25-yard pools. If you have to swim 25 yards, if you're 6'5" as opposed to 5'5", that's an extra foot that I have on you just by physique that you're going to have to, if you're shorter, gain that extra foot. So that's why you see, and then it's doubled by the fact that like, if you have good reach and good wingspan, I can pull further than someone who's 6 inches shorter than me because I can get more water and pull. Like it's as simple as that. So being tall is just a natural advantage in the sport. You can do it without being tall. It's definitely possible. Not every Olympian is going to be 6'5", 6'4", or like 6 foot for the girls. Like you can be 5'8" or 5'11", but it takes a little bit more and it's a little bit tougher. And a lot of the times they're doing specialty stuff.
Here's a question for you. And this is something that I didn't realize until I started watching. Maybe for those who are watching, you don't watch a lot of swimming, but lane swimming, there's actually advantages to being in different lanes. So when you get your lane choice, and I think it's 3 or 4, is it 4?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you always want to be in the middle of the pool.
So explain that a little bit for us. I already had this kind of conversation with Hannah, but explain to us why that's a thing. Like, why is it on the outside of the pool? Are you going to be slower just by the nature of the way the pool
So
works?
there's 2 things. The first is based on who's ahead of you. There's an actual like thing where you can ride someone's wake, where like as they're swimming, depending on which part of the lane that they're in, we would do drills all the time that like pay attention to who's around you when you're swimming. Obviously race your race, but like if the person on the lane to your left is riding the right side, ride the left side of your lane if you're behind them, and you can it's almost like slipstreaming and car racing. It's like very much the same thing of like you can ride someone's wake and get speed for free, which I think is super, super interesting. And then the other thing is based on just the way that the waves work, you get a lot of waves back off the walls if you're on the outside lanes. That's actually why if you guys watch the Olympics, they keep those end lanes empty. There's always an end lane on both sides that's empty every single time because they don't want someone on that wall because it can totally mess with someone's swim.
It's something that I wouldn't have ever thought of when I looked at it as a casual, fan, seeing the people race, the Canadian women, especially over the last little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's been it's just interesting getting those little peaks of just like, hey, you don't want that lane, and there's a reason, there's a benefit to getting that better time in the semis is that you can get a better lane and hopefully get a better result because of it.
Yeah, and the other thing, which is something that's really tough for us, is so for the summer team that I coach, one of the meets that we went to, the outside lane that we had water jets pushing in. It's like the water, like the pool was like their drain system and their filter system had like jets that were pushing water, not crazy fast, kind of like less than a hot tub, but like still pushing water. Like you could visibly feel, and for our 8-year-old kids who are not very strong swimmers, that water will genuinely push them sideways and will make them swim not straight, which can be the difference between winning and losing a meet. As trivial as that might sound. So there's so many different like strategy things that I do when I'm coaching and when I'm like writing lineups for swim meets, that like I need to plan like who do I want to be swimming where, to be racing against who, and there's so much strategy that goes into it, and I think a lot of it is missed. But I think I think the other thing is Inda Rosed said like the water resistance, because water resistance pushes to the side. That's why when you push off, you want to push off in streamline, because you want your hands to push the water to the side so that you don't get it on your body. It's the same thing that if the people in the middle are swimming and pushing water to the sides, all the water resistance is going to go to the side, so the people in the end lane are catching the wake of all of the people on the inside of them.
So almost the further behind you are, the more it compounds, and it just becomes harder and harder to catch up.
Exactly, and that's why all of these races you see in the Olympics, it looks like there's like a big triangle that's racing. If everyone races the speed that they're supposed to, the people in the middle are supposed to be the quickest, and it seeds outward.
Yeah. What have you, before we jump into a little bit about your coaching, but have you been watching the swimming events at the Tokyo Olympics?
Yeah.
Have you enjoyed it?
I've loved it. It's been a super, super interesting meet. The U.S. hasn't been as dominant as they were in recent years. I think one thing that's really tough is American casual fans of swimming seem to associate the U.S. in swimming with only gold medals, especially when you had Phelps, you had Lochte, you had Ledecky, but like some of these swimmers just did not lose events. So there's very much an association in the U.S. with like, oh, silver's not good. If you ain't first, you're last. Like all of this sort of stuff that it's really interesting. One person that literally went to prom with one of my friends was at Tokyo and got bronze in the 200 IM. And everyone's like, oh, wow, like you didn't get gold, but congrats. And it's like, you just placed third. You were the third fastest swimmer in the event in the whole world. You just did it on the biggest stage at age 19. What do you mean that wasn't enough? Like third place is more than good enough. And it's something that has to be celebrated. And I think that's something that Americans are finally waking up to with this Olympics, which I'm really glad to see. But also just the quality of swimming has been fantastic. I feel a little bit bad for everyone with these Olympics that it was supposed to be 2020. And for a lot of these people, especially if you're not in college, if you're the 24, 25, 26-year-old who trains year round, you tend to take not a year off, but like a year kind of training less to recover. And these guys have all had to do an extra full year of training and are then going to miss their year off before they have to start training for 2024, which is also going to be really interesting. So we'll see how many people make this their last Olympics. I would expect a lot of older swimmers to do that because their body won't be able to recover.
Yeah. And I think what was exciting for Canadians, at least the Canadian, is that a lot of our swimmers are young. The men, there's a couple of exceptions to that, but on the women's side, almost all of our swimmers are very young. It's kind of an up and coming group. And you mentioned bronze, and I'm just going to bring this up because I talked to Hannah, my partner, because she was an athlete. She was competitive. And when I said, oh, a silver, that's a great result. And she goes, if you're the one swimming, it's not a great feeling coming in silver. You're going to feel it better later, right? But you don't swim for a silver. You swim for a gold every single time. You swim for the win. Do you teach your kids that type of attitude, or is it more...
I mean, we want our kids, when we're coaching, we want them to win. Silver certainly stings more than bronze stings, especially if it's a close race. Getting second place, getting out touched sucks. I've had it happen to me more than my fair share of times. But I think the number one thing that we try and teach, especially I'm teaching at a youth level with a bunch of people who only swim in the summer. They start June 15, they end August 15. And then other than that, they will never touch a pool. and then they'll come back the next summer and do the same thing. We're teaching these kids more than anything. It's about the value of understanding how to be sportsmanlike, understanding how to compete at a high level, trying to see the value of a sport that you're going to be able to do for the rest of your life. One of the officials in our league who I've become close friends with is probably in his 70s. And he's like, yep, I still go swim every single day, do 2,000 meters. And that's it. Like, that's his thing. It's like, there's a lot more to what we try and do than just go get your wins. There's always going to be your couple really good people who you push to try and win, but we have a team of 80, and I think we were going to bring 35 to our swim meet yesterday. Like, we have a lot of kids who who are on the team and are non-competitive and just practice with us, and will come to the meets that they're invited to, but not the crazy high level ones. Our championships is next week. We're bringing 15 people of our team of 90. There's a lot of people who are not at that high level.
Yep.
And we're just trying to teach them, have fun, enjoy it. Being in a pool is super valuable, and it's a gift that we actually get to swim every day, because there's a lot of places where it's not an option and it's not available, which sucks. But enjoy it and get pleasure out of being able to compete in a league like this.
And you mentioned something about swimming, right? Like, it's not something that everybody has a chance to do. It's not also something that everybody learns as a child. I as a child, I was lucky. My parents took me to swimming lessons. I was in the pool pretty often. The Pan American Games was hosted here in 67 and in 99. So the swimming facilities in Winnipeg are actually very good. Like, we have great swimming facilities. And as a kid, I can remember it was a natural thing on Fridays to go to what was called a jungle night, what they called it. And it was, the lanes were open. You had ropes. You could swim out into the water, drop off and fall, or you could do laps, do dives, and what I think that I always take away from that, and I didn't realize it because I was having fun at the time, but I was actually learning a life-saving technique for someone who lives in a province where there's loads of lakes and rivers, and you're constantly at people's cabins or you're on someone's boat.
100%.
It's something that people don't even realize is as much as it's important to learn, sport and camaraderie and developing, yourself in a physical sense. It's also something that I think about quite often, hearing from stories of people who didn't get a chance to go to a pool when they were a kid, and now they're afraid to go to the beach. They're afraid to go to the lake or whatever it is. I think there's a lot of value, right, in what you're doing with 80 plus
100%.
kids. Those kids are going to be able to feel confident going out. Oh, my buddy's got a pool. Like, I'm going to go hang out with him, and I'm not going to be afraid on the edge. I'm not going to be worried about it. It's not this scary, dangerous thing as much as, lakes or can be scary. It's a life skill that I think everyone should have access to. Do you agree with that kind of thing?
Total. I could not have said it better. The first thing that I'm also going to say is, the earlier you learn how to swim, the easier it is. But learning to swim in a pool, if you're an adult, the thing that we have a couple kids so our competitive team is not the same as, like, we also do lessons with kids to teach them how to swim. And they are not like, we keep them separate, but I do both of them. And I think I get more pleasure out of teaching kids how to swim. I love both of them a lot. But I think one of the ones that I've loved seeing is one of my coaches is teaching like an 11-year-old how to swim. And this kid, like, one of the things that's tough is it's like, you can just tell him, if you are struggling, if you need to, you can stand. Our pool's 4 feet deep. You're taller than 4 feet. If you're struggling, just stand up. But a lot of people don't have access to a pool. It's really interesting. Something that I want to do more research and raising money for is there's so many places, especially in DC. So I'm on the Georgetown's club swim team, and we try and raise money every year because there's so few pools east of the Anacostia River in DC. But like, with it, as a result, there's so few people in that part of DC, which is a lot more low income, that are able to swim because they just don't have access to a pool. It's just a case of, like, they do what they can with what they have. And it sucks. Like, it's really sad to see, because you can drown like that.
Yep.
You can be in the beach and a rip current can start, and all of a sudden you're out to sea. And if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't know how to be aware in that situation, you are toast. And it's the same thing in rivers. It's the same thing in lakes. Anything can happen very, very quickly. And learning how to swim is such an important skill. And it genuinely breaks my heart that so few people are actually able to do it. And I'm not saying that you need to be able to do it at like a competitive level where you're going to swim for universities, but being able to get into a pool and not drown. or be in a lake and tread water and know how to float on your back and know how to not get panicked in a pool, because the more you panic, the more you waste your energy, the more likely you are to drown.
Yeah.
It's all of these things that people don't know until you know it.
And it's through experience and being in the pool or being in the lake that gives you that ability to go, okay, I'm okay here. Like,
yeah, like you can't learn how to swim on ground.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
it's the same thing as like riding a bike. You're not going to know how to ride a bike until you ride a bike. And with swimming, if you don't have access to the water, then you're not going to know how to swim.
And I just think back again, I'm stepping away from like the competitive side for a minute. I just think about all the memories I had growing up. If I wasn't able to swim, like I'm cutting out hours and days of memory every summer. You know,
Totally
and
agreed.
especially from a place like Canada, you know, we value our summers. We try to get the most out of them that we can. And so that swimming that we can get in the 2 months where the lake isn't absolutely frigid, you know, those are memories that I remember for the rest of my life. Question from the chat. It was a little bit earlier, but I'm bringing it up, and maybe you have some insight in here. But Interosi had to ask. He wants to know, and if you have seen this, guys, it's a method of treating the muscles, massaging, whatever it is. It's called cupping, and it pulls pieces of your skin into these kind of plastic cups and draws blood to the surface. I guess is kind of the best summary of it.
Yeah.
Does it work? Do you?
So
stand by
I've never cupped. I have plenty of friends who have. It's a competitive racing thing that a lot of people do, especially to release muscles and release tension. I mean, I think back to the sort of stuff that, like, the sort of just muscle wear and tear that I had was to the point where, like, when I would swim, so this shoulder right here, after every practice, I kept a baseball in my bag. I would put the baseball on the wall and roll it around my shoulder to loosen the muscle, because otherwise I could not lift my arm above here. Like, it in class, this is as high as I raise my hand, just like this.
You're in pain, but you have a question type of situation.
Literally. And it's like cupping, especially for people who believe, like, it does release muscle tension from what I know. I never felt like I needed to do it that badly. I think that you can get a lot of the same release from stretching correctly, from warming up and warming down. There's a ton of swimmers who show up late to practice, leave early, don't do their proper warm up, don't do their proper warm down, don't stretch. And that's how you get injured. The same way that you wouldn't show up to a gym, sit down on the bench, do a max rep, and then leave. You're going to do something to warm up. You're going to do something to rest at the end if you're serious about it. But cupping definitely can help, especially if it's something that you get into. It's just not for me. Too expensive.
I'll be honest with you. My wife bought a cupping set not long ago. I want to say a couple years ago. And I've actually started to use them on my wrist for just carpal tunnel, computer too long, and I can say, Simon, that in my experience it has helped. I get bruising on my wrist, yeah, I absolutely do, but it feels so much better. It brings that blood flow right to the surface. It's such a weird looking thing though, especially when you see athletes doing it, and the intensity and size of the cups that they are using are wild in comparison.
I mean, like, you can get cups that are like that big, and then these athletes are using like full like donut hole. Like, they're going crazy with them, and they have them just up and down their back. A lot of people really like to do it right before a big competitive meet, which is why you always see it, because they're like, okay, in the general training scene, because I guess I'm sure a lot of people don't know, but when you're doing swim training, part of it is you swim, you train for a while, and then right before a swim meet, you start to ramp down your training and start to cut distance, and that's something called a taper. And as you taper, that's when you start to try and swim fast. So, like, everyone who's swimming at the Olympics is on taper right now. They've all been training like crazy, and they've brought all of their training down to basically nothing. And cupping is something that a lot of people do during that period to feel extra sharp.
Would the cupping also help them feel warm? Like, I know it's a big thing for swimmers to keep that temperature up. You see them sometimes in jackets, like trying to keep warm. Is that a part of it, or is that just not connected
it's more just muscle release, because you wouldn't cup on the day of a meet. Although those like the big parkas that everyone wear, it's because after you've warmed up, you legitimately are trying to keep your muscles warm.
Yeah.
Like, I could sit on a pool deck that's like 85 degrees and humid, and after getting in the pool, I'll put on a hoodie and sweatpants.
Yeah.
And even if I start sweating, I'd rather do that than sit there and get chilly.
you can always tell in the relays, if you watch the Olympic relays and the 4 come out, you can always tell who's going first because they're not wearing the most clothing to stay warm.
Literally.
Yeah. This has been a great conversation, Jeter. I really do appreciate you popping on here. So coaching, you've been coaching this group for a while, large group, 80 to 90 kids. What are some of your favorite moments from coaching this group or just coaching in general?
That's tough.
Put you on the spot.
No, I mean, it's not even on the spot. It's just there's so much that I've like genuinely loved doing. I mean, I love coaching. I think some of my favorite moments, probably, so this is my first year as the full head coach of the team. So winning our first meet of the season. And there's a tradition that when you win a meet at home, everyone jumps in the pool and all the kids always toss the coaches. Getting tossed in the pool after winning my first meet, there was like a grin on my face that I could not erase for a day.
Love it.
Especially because it was a close meet against our crosstown rivals. And like picking up that one that felt really, really good. I think some of my other ones is seeing just like when you tell someone to like try something and it actually works.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, wow, like that made me so much better. That's the thing that I really care about is just like trying to help improve the swimming quality of these kids.
I'll be back in just 1 second.
Yeah, go for it. But yeah, I guess until Scoot's back, if anyone in chat has a quick question, I can answer. I'm good at entertaining. Also, hi everyone. I'm trying. I try my best. Well, I don't want Scoot to miss the best parts of coaching because he should hear this. Is water wet? That's a philosophical question. Philosophical question. I think you have to say it is because if something is dry and water gets put onto it, it makes that thing wet. Therefore, water should be wet because otherwise, how would two dry things make something wet? But that's my personal opinion on the matter. If anyone disagrees, I believe you're wrong. Depends on the race. Depends on the race into Rosie. On a short distance race, absolutely. Like on a 50 or a 100, the start in your turn or turns decides the race 100%. On something like on the mile, your dive does not make or break the race. You can have a terrible dive and still do it if wanted. So I wore 2 swim caps when I swam. The way I would do it is I'd put on a swim cap, then I'd put my goggles on and then another cap. The reason why I did it is the goggles stick better on a cap, but also if you have your goggles on top, there's a tendency for them to fall off. So I would always put the second cap over it so that the goggles were less likely to fall. Because the last thing that you want when you're in a high level race is to dive in and for the cap to fall. I've just been answering questions. I did a Q&A.
Sorry. I had to run to the washroom. I apologize.
I just did a Q&A. So
I was just like, okay, I'm gonna run upstairs for a minute.
It's all good. I know how to entertain.
Did someone ask the 2 swim caps question? That's fantastic.
And
I actually had that on my list.
So I answered. I can repeat it, but basically I wore 2 swim caps. The first one, so goggles, there's 2 things. The first one, the goggles stick better on a cap. So you want to have a cap first. But I would tend to put a cap over my goggles so that the goggles don't fall off because that's like the absolute last thing that you would ever want to happen in a big race.
Here's another question from the chat here. I'll bring it up for you. Simon asked, or into Rosie, you mentioned the turn. Is the speed of the turn of the force of the push more important? I think he means is the speed of the turn or the force of the push more important?
Depends on the race. If you're doing freestyle, I'd probably say, I mean, in all of them, you want both. But if you had to pick one over the other, I'd probably go the push. Because you can go as slow as you want you can go as fast as you want. If you push off the wall and get nowhere, you're starting from dead water. But I don't know. I think it also depends on the stroke, because obviously you have different turns for freestyle, backstroke, breaststroke, and butterfly. Freestyle is a flip turn. Backstroke, you turn over onto your stomach and then do a flip turn. Breaststroke and butterfly, because of the rules, you have to touch the wall with 2 hands, so you have to do an open turn. But even like all of these minor things, all of these little technical things, to someone who doesn't know swimming, they're going to be like, what does any of that mean?
But you know what? It's funny because as I've said, I'm watching the Olympic events. Now, what you're saying, it makes sense. I'm like, oh, okay, I've seen that turn. I've seen, how they have to touch the wall or how they do that turn at the other end. Out of the different strokes that you've mentioned, do you think there's one that's more difficult than the rest?
Butterfly.
Butterfly?
No hesitation, butterfly.
What makes butterfly so much more difficult?
You can't slow down. With freestyle, backstroke, and breaststroke, you can turn up and down the speed dial. Butterfly, the way that you have to do the stroke, because of the way that the timing of the stroke works with your kicks and your arms, there's no way to like slow it down unless you're going to try and go up and down more, and like then it still feels like you're drowning. Like, I was a butterflyer. I love butterfly. You race butterfly fast or you don't race butterfly. There's like no like nice and easy butterfly. It just it doesn't. You can slow it down a little bit to like pace yourself for a longer race. But other than that, you can't. Like, there's no on-off. It's an on-off switch instead of a dial. Is the best way to describe it.
Is there a plan for you to continue to make coaching or swimming a part of your life as you go forward? Like, obviously, you're going to still swim. You're still going to be in the pool, I would imagine. But do you see yourself doing more with this in your life, or spending more time at the pool?
So it's a tough question. When I first picked up swim coaching, I did it. I just graduated from high school. I had a summer to kill before I went to college, needed a job. Literally went to the pool closest to my house and said, hey, are you hiring coaches? And they said, yeah, want to come for an interview? I went for the interview and they hired me. As simple as that. I think from that, I've had a lot more appreciation for what coaching represents, and I do enjoy it. I don't know how I'd work it into whatever my life is. I mean, I still barely know what I want to do when I graduate. So depending on like where I end up after I graduate from college, there's a good shot that I might try and find a way to work it in. But like, there's definitely no guarantee, I'd say. I'd love to do it. I love coaching. I love working in the sport, and I'd love to have swimming as a part of my life. I just don't know exactly how it's going to fit in right away. But like, one of the things I even think about is like my high school. The head coach of my high school team works as a teacher year round, and then coaches for my high school and coaches during the summer and coaches for a year round club team. He then hires other people who are like either former alums from the school or other people that he just knows in the area who also are around to coach at whatever hours they're free. So I'm sure there's other schools that are the same way. And like, you can do it. Like, one of our coaches was an EMT full time. And the only time that he was available was at 6:30 a.m. for our Wednesday and Friday 6:30 a.m. practices. So he'd come to those. And other than that, he worked his EMT job. Never came to swim meets, literally just ran the morning practices. We had another guy who was an EMT, was only free on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. He ran our lifts. He would just come into the gym, help us lift, and then go back to his job.
So it sounds like you, no matter where you'll end up, no matter what happens, as you'll find a space if it works for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope, is if I can find the space I want to. It's just a question of, is it going to be possible? Especially trying to balance when I graduate. I'm going to have a full-time job. If possible, I'd like to continue to create content. And with coaching, I just don't know how all of the numbers and the hours add up. And something's going to have to give somewhere, but it all comes down to, if something is a priority and you really want to do it, you'll make the time for it. Absolutely. You just have to figure out what's going to get sacrificed.
Really enjoyed our conversation today, Jeter. This has been really, really nice.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on.
Before we end off, I do always like to chat a little bit about it, because you seem to be what I would call a sports generalist, somebody who loves to watch a lot of sports, whether or not you're into every single sport as intently as swimming or maybe baseball. I've come into your streams, we've had chats, and doesn't matter what sport it is, you tend to know at least some idea of what I'm talking about if I'm
Yeah.
babbling about hockey or whatever it is. What does sports add to your life? Like, could you imagine not having sports in your life?
No.
What does it mean to you on a day-to-day basis to kind of be able to follow these teams, these athletes, and these sports?
I mean, for one, as a kid, it started with role models. I mean, there's a reason that my name is CoachJeter. We've covered the coach part. The Jeter part literally comes from I live in New York. I grew up as a diehard Jeter fan. I mean, even it's not in frame behind me, but there are multiple things behind me of photos of Jeter. Like, he and sports as a whole represented to me, especially as a kid, an escape from some stuff that was going on otherwise. It was a place where I could just like fully focus energy. So I've always loved it, and it's been something that I can obsess over and that I understand and that makes sense to me. There's some sports that don't, but like anything that I can wrap my head around, I will follow it and try and understand it. I want to work in sports when I graduate. I don't know what sport yet. I don't know if it'll be a multitude of sports. I don't know if I'll do something that is cross sport. I don't know if that's the word. I don't know. Or if I'm going to focus on being in a league office or working for a team or what angle I want to take on it. But I know that sports is going to be a part of my life for the rest of my life. Just because of how much pleasure I get out of it. It's something that to the same way that some people love making and writing and playing music or playing and reading and writing books and all that, like whatever it is to them, sports is my like escape and my thing that it's a passion. I kind of got off track there, but
Okay,
yeah.
I don't think you could see. I basically what I'm getting from you is you don't think you could see your life any other way without having some sport to escape to when you need.
Definitely
that, right?
not.
Yeah,
definitely not.
You and me, I think we're very similar in that sense, Jeter. I think if there's a live event on, I don't tend to care too much about who's playing. I just want to learn about it, get to know who's involved, and
Yeah.
get to know the characters. Like you mentioned, Jeter is not you, but the man. Derek Jeter, he was somewhat of a legend in his sport, and especially growing in New York, he would have been almost seen as God, I think, a little bit when he was playing.
Pretty much. And like I mean, I'll give myself an age. I was born in 2000. The Yankees were kind of peak late 90s into 2009 was when the Yankees, they only won the ring in 2000, and then 2009 we didn't get 01. We threw away 04, but like, and then growing up watching those 09 Yankees and then watching the team with the end of Jeter's career and all those guys, right as I was kind of coming of age, seeing those sorts of teams. I mean, I still remember vividly, my parents went to the game 6 of the 09 series and watched the Yankees win. And I was at home sitting on my couch watching the TV and knowing that my parents were there. Like, it's a very surreal thing being in an area that has so many sports, and I've always loved them, and I will 100% keep them as a part of my life the same way that I will keep video games. Like those are kind of my two happy places.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's the same for you.
100% the same way for me. And it's funny you bring up the 2001. I can remember watching that World Series in 2001. I feel old now. But, you talk about baseball, you talk about moments. Before I let you go, I think the one thing that I could relate to was growing up a Jays fan, seeing the 92-93 series and remembering that. I don't remember much from those ages and that time, but I certainly remember the end of the game when they won the World Series the first time. And the one thing that sticks out in my mind, and you're going to laugh, is there was a customized Coca-Cola commercial congratulating the Jays on winning the cup. And as a kid, for whatever reason, I thought that is the coolest thing ever. They just made a new ad for them, being as a dumb little kid, right?
Yeah.
But it's those moments, we carry them forward. They mean something to us. They might mean nothing to somebody else, but we hold on to them dearly.
And I think that's the value of sports, is it creates so many memories for so many people, and it provides so much happiness, and in a lot of cases it provides an escape for a lot of people. It can provide an escape to a better life if you're living in an area where you don't have a lot of other options, and it can be an escape from a tough world no matter who you are. And it can put you into a different sort of world and realm that is way, way different and super, super awesome. The same way that movies or anything. I mean, I think this is probably my favorite story and my last story. Is my favorite book and movie of all time is Moneyball. Like I have literally the copy is right above this shoulder right here. I'm reading it again right now. That's that book right there. That is Moneyball. And every time I watch the movie, I cry. Always at the same spots, always with the same lines. And the one line that always sticks with me is, how can you not be romantic about sports?
Yeah.
Because it is what it is. You're always going to find storylines. You're always going to find things that stick to you, and everyone will have their own stories. Everyone will have the own things that they remember. Two people can be sitting next to each other at a baseball game and see entirely different things the entire game, and both can go home happy. And I think that's the value of it. In the same way that movies or music or whatever entertains, sports create that entertainment. And there's a lot of people that kind of corrupt that and expect these athletes to always just be entertainers and forget that they're human. That's one of the issues we're seeing right now with the Olympics, especially with Simone Biles. But these athletes are human, but they create magical moments, and life is certainly better with them.
You've said it so well. The only thing I could add there is, as much as we love and follow sports, we certainly, I think as fans, there could be more empathy for the work that these athletes put in, and, understanding when they say, I'm not comfortable, I'm not ready to go, I'm not 100%. There needs to be more of us saying, hey, I've had those days. Like we've never taken a sick day from work in our life, like judging an athlete for taking one in theirs. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Exactly. Totally agree.
But Jeter, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It would be a privilege to come back on and talk something else later on. I'm sure we'll hash out details.
I'm sure. I was thinking to myself, I wrote down here, a topic in the future could be a little bit of a baseball roundtable.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a shame we couldn't do it today with the deadline, but yeah, it's with all the crazy deals that are going. I've never seen a trade deadline like this ever.
So this week was crazy. Just before we end, there was the NHL trade and free agency opening.
Mm-hmm.
There was the NBA draft. Yep. There was the Major League trade deadline. There's the Olympics. There's the Gold Cup. Like there was so much going on this week.
And then the Premier League starts in 2 weeks.
Yeah, if you're a sports fan, it's beautiful, but at the same time, it's also like, how do I find more time in my life to follow?
And the problem is, as a working man, it's torture.
Yeah, exactly. So Jeter, where can people find you if they're looking to connect with you these days?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I stream on Twitch. I try to stream 3 to 4 times a week. Normally play Football Manager, but also mix in some other games, some RPGs, some host of other stuff. And that's twitch.tv/CoachJeter. You can also find me on Twitter. Twitter is probably my social media where I'm most active. And that's the handle is CoachJeter FM. CoachJeter was taken, unfortunately. I'm also on Instagram a little bit, but not much. And then if you pop into any of those, both of those have my link tree attached if you want to join the Discord, because we're pretty active in there. Especially, we do a lot of watch-alongs for sports games and stuff like that. So if people are interested in joining in for those, just check out on Twitter. I normally tend to post whenever I'm doing anything, and I'd say Twitter's the best spot to find me. So yeah, thanks again.
So you got it. Now, Coach Jeter, you guys can reach out to him if you're looking for a really welcoming place to talk, whether video games, whether it's sports. This guy's going to be available. He is a genuinely nice person, and it's been a pleasure to have you on the show today. Andrew, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Scoot. I appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
So that was Coach Jeter, Twitch content creator, swimming coach, and a college student from the United States of America. Kuba's just dropped his link tree into the chat there. As again, you can find him at the handle on Twitter at CoachJeterFM. So this has been episode 5 of Scoot Talks Sports. Massive thank you to everybody who's hung out in the chat today. If you're interested in taking part next time, we stream Monday and Friday at 12 o'clock Central Standard Time, or you can find us on the podcast anywhere you find your podcast simply by searching Scoot Talks Sports. Thank you very much for being here. So that was a really great show, guys. Really do appreciate you guys being a part of it. I'm just going to make a note on my end here. Trying to get better about noting where my edits are going to be. But yeah, thank you everybody. Thanks to the guests for being part of the show. It was a fantastic episode. I really enjoyed myself. Big love to everyone who's been part of the chat, who's been retweeting or sharing or subscribing. You guys are all legends. Let's go ahead and figure out somebody to raid in the old sports realm, shall we? Let me go ahead and just take a peek and see who is live. Unless if you guys have any suggestions, let me know. There's a 3-on-3 basketball tournament on here. Let's see. Yeah, I noticed that, so I was looking for him. You know what? Let's talk trade deadline, guys. Let's talk trade deadline. I will need to raid another sports person here. Otherwise, I'd say go to wasted possession. But let's go ahead and raid the Aunt Ortiz, I think. And I think she's talking baseball trade deadline. So let's go ahead and raid over to her. If you guys could drop in some love into the chat, that would be super helpful. Super thankful for it. Otherwise, I will catch you guys on the next stream, which will be Monday. And I have some really exciting guests for Monday. Stay tuned to Twitter. You'll find out more. So without further ado, let's go ahead and raid the Aunt Ortiz. Much love. We'll talk to you soon, and I'll see you guys on Monday.